A kid eats a cursed fruit and loses the sea forever. And in this recap, he punches pirates to free dreams. One wrong move means death, and his captain's hat is at risk. Wait till you see Luffy catch a bullet with his chest. Then Zoro snaps his bonds, and every marine freezes instantly. And Shanks' glare makes the Sea King retreat like a coward. Jewel D. Roger stands smiling while the blades end his era. His last words dare the world to chase treasure and freedom. That single dare floods the seas with pirates and desperate dreams. Years later, Monkey D. Luffy grows up worshipping bold outlaw legends. He begs the pirate Shanks to let him sail someday too freely. Shanks laughs softly and says the ocean swallows careless children whole at once. Luffy refuses to listen and swears he will become Pirate King. One day, bandits mock Shanks inside a small seaside tavern. Shanks stays relaxed and spills drink instead of throwing fists. Luffy erupts with pride and charges the bandits outside alone. The bandits seize Luffy and drag him toward the harbor. Shanks suddenly appears behind them and the bandits freeze in dread. A sea monster bursts up and everyone thinks Luffy is finished. Shanks steps forward alone and glares with terrifying calm authority. The monster recoils and sinks as if the ocean obeyed Shanks. Luffy watches in shock and feels his bravery turn into shame. Later, Luffy finds a strange fruit and bites without thinking. His body stretches like rubber and everyone screams at his mistake. Shanks explains Luffy can never swim again and storms away. Then Shanks places his straw hat on Luffy with heavy promise. He says return it when you are a great pirate worth trusting. Luffy cries and swears his dream will never break again ever now. Years pass and Luffy launches alone inside a tiny wooden boat. A sudden storm flips his pride into panic and darkness. A barrel spins in violent waves and something knocks it hard. Inside the barrel, Luffy laughs and punches the lid open proudly. He shouts his name into the wind and dares the sea to answer. A massive sea monster swallows him and the world turns black. Luffy stretches his arms and blasts out through sharp teeth alone at once. He floats laughing while hunger and salt sting his eyes. A pirate ship spots him and hauls him aboard with suspicion. There he meets Kobe, who trembles quietly while scrubbing the deck below. Kobe says the cruel captain Alvida owns everyone on this ship. Alvida appears boasting she is the most beautiful woman alive. She swings a spiked club and the crew praises her out of fear. Kobe whispers his secret dream is joining the Marines someday. Luffy tells Kobe true dreams demand action, not endless apologizing. Alvida hears them clearly and storms over with murderous rage. Luffy smiles and asks why she lies to herself every day. Alvida raises her club and Kobe believes Luffy will die now. The club slams Luffy but his rubber body absorbs the impact. The crew stares hard as Luffy bounces back, grinning wider. Alvida attacks again and Luffy plants his feet like iron. He punches once and Alvida flies across the deck screaming. Kobe shakes with disbelief as the captain crashes into the rail. Luffy tells Kobe he is free and should choose his path. If you really like the story, comment below, so we can create more episodes daily. What would you do if Alvida threatened your only hope today? Smash like and subscribe for more adventures and bold choices. Kobe finally shouts he will become a Marine no matter what. Luffy praises him and says courage begins with one loud step. The crew turns on Alvida and she escapes furious and humiliated. Kobe and Luffy take a small boat and reach the next island. Marine flags snap above town rooftops and fear hangs everywhere. People whisper everywhere about Roronoa Zoro, the pirate hunter swordsman. They say Zoro is tied in the baseyard and left to suffer. When Luffy sees Zoro bound upright, he feels destiny tugging hard. Zoro stares forward silent and refuses water despite sun and pain. Kobe asks why anyone would challenge Marines for a stranger. Luffy says strong friends are worth more than safe obedience. A little girl named Rika sneaks in with rice balls for Zoro. Helmeppo catches her and kicks the food into the dirt. Rika cries and Zoro still thanks her with a fierce glare. Luffy steps closer and Helmeppo orders soldiers to aim rifles. Kobe panics but Luffy keeps smiling like danger is a joke. Luffy offers Zoro a deal to join his crew freely today right now. Zoro refuses at first and says he will not serve anyone. Luffy says he wants partners not servants and waits patiently. Helmeppo smirks and announces Zoro will be executed after 3 days. Kobe hears that lie and feels anger replacing fear inside. That night Luffy sneaks into the base to retrieve Zoro's swords. He moves past guards and finds the weapons locked away tightly. A marine spots him and alarms erupt across the courtyard. Zoro hears the chaos and finally turns his head toward Luffy. Kobe hides trembling while footsteps pound closer from every side. Luffy shouts that he will save Zoro and proves it soon. Captain Morgan arrives towering with an axe hand and cold eyes. He orders everyone to shoot and calls justice his personal rule. Kobe sees Morgan's cruelty and finally understands why townspeople cower. Luffy steps forward and declares war on Morgan's twisted justice. Morgan lifts his axe and the air feels ready to split open. Zoro strains against ropes and swears he will survive this day. Kobe whispers he must choose either safety or his real dream. Luffy smashes a wall and soldiers scatter in sudden panic. Helmeppo hides behind marines again while shouting empty threats loudly. Luffy reaches the swords and tosses them toward Zoro with force. One blade lands near Zoro's feet and hope sparks in his eyes. Guns click again and Kobe realizes bloodshed will start instantly. Luffy grins and tells Zoro to stand and fight beside him. Zoro shifts his shoulders and the ropes begin tearing apart slowly. The yard falls silent and Morgan's shout echoes like thunder. Then Zoro's bonds snap and every marine takes one step back. Zoro lands on his feet and grips the sword tightly. Marines raise rifles but hesitate before his calm murderous focus. Luffy stands beside Zoro and laughs at their shaky courage. Captain Morgan roars and orders them to fire without mercy. Kobe freezes as bullets threaten to tear everything apart. Zoro says he will cut down anyone blocking his dream. Luffy says he likes that answer and steps forward boldly. Helmeppo screams that Zoro is a pirate and must die. Zoro glares at Helmeppo and the courtyard chills instantly. Rika watches from behind crates with tears and clenched hands. Morgan charges first and swings his axe hand toward Luffy. Luffy dodges and the blade smashes stone like brittle glass. The marines gasp and the next strike comes even faster. Zoro moves but stops when Luffy signals him to wait. Luffy stretches his arm and punches Morgan across the yard. Morgan skids back but rises furious and bleeding slightly. Kobe sees Morgan bleed and realizes the commander is human. Helmeppo panics and grabs a marine to use as shield. Zoro steps forward and the marines retreat toward the walls. Morgan screams about justice and slams his axe down again. Luffy blocks with rubber arms and the impact echoes loudly. Zoro takes a deep breath and draws his second blade. The two swords flash and sunlight streaks across their edges. Everyone feels the air tighten like rope ready to snap. Kobe whispers this fight will decide their lives forever. Helmeppo shouts he will punish Rika for helping Zoro. Rika flinches and the crowd murmurs with helpless anger. Zoro's eyes sharpen and his voice drops into cold steel. He says, "Touch that girl and you will lose everything." Morgan laughs and calls Zoro a dog who bites masters. Zoro answers he serves no master and never will again. Luffy grins and tells Zoro to aim at the enemy. Morgan lunges again and the marines finally pull triggers. Bullets fly and Kobe screams as smoke fills the yard. Luffy twists his torso and the bullets ricochet off harmlessly. Marines stare as if watching a nightmare refuse to die. Zoro darts forward and slices rifles in half with one swing. The gun barrels fall and clatter across stone like rain. Helmeppo backs away and stumbles over his own boots. Morgan orders bayonets and charges with heavy pounding steps. Zoro meets him head-on and their weapons clash violently. Sparks burst and the crowd shields eyes from flashing light. For a moment Zoro's blades tremble under Morgan's strength. Then Zoro shifts his stance and the tremble disappears. Kobe feels his heart pound harder than any stormy sea. Luffy shouts encouragement and punches marines away from Zoro. Helmeppo screams again and grabs Rika by the collar. Rika cries and begs him to stop hurting everyone. Kobe steps forward trembling and tells Helmeppo to release her. Helmeppo sneers and calls Kobe a cowardly stain on justice. Kobe clenches his fists and refuses to step back now. Do you think Kobe's courage could change this cruel base today? Comment your answer and smash like if you felt that fear. Subscribe now if you want more fast stories and battles. Morgan sees Helmeppo's hostage play and laughs proudly again. He calls Helmeppo his son and says fear keeps order. Zoro snarls and tells Morgan fear only breeds more pirates. Morgan swings again and Zoro ducks under the blade quickly. Zoro counters and cuts the axe handle, leaving Morgan stunned. Morgan stares at the ruined weapon and roars in disbelief. The Marines hesitate and some lower weapons with trembling hands. Luffy tells them Morgan lies and uses them like tools. Kobe shouts that real justice protects people, not egos. The words shock the soldiers and the town seems to breathe. Helmeppo slaps Kobe and says Marines will kill him later. Kobe falls but rises again with tears and stubborn anger. Zoro steps toward Helmeppo and Helmeppo drags Rika closer. Luffy stretches his arm and snatches Rika gently away. Helmeppo yelps as he loses his only shield instantly. Morgan charges at Luffy and screams for his son's honor. Luffy meets him and drives a punch into Morgan's jaw. Morgan crashes hard and the courtyard shakes from the impact. Silence follows and everyone waits for Morgan to stand again. Kobe looks at Morgan and feels a terrifying new certainty. Zoro points his blade at Morgan and demands the base surrender. Some Marines drop weapons and others look at each other. Helmeppo grabs a pistol and aims at Luffy with shaking hands. Zoro turns and his eyes narrow with lethal patience. Kobe lunges forward shouting that Helmeppo must stop now. The pistol fires and the shot echoes across the town. Luffy spins and catches the bullet against his rubber chest. Helmeppo screams and runs toward the gate like a coward. Zoro rushes after him and the Marines block the path. Steel flashes again and the last rifles scatter across stone. Kobe watches Zoro move and understands true strength now. Luffy tells Kobe he did great and should keep going. Kobe nods but fears the Marines will still punish him. Zoro says Kobe has guts and that matters more than rank. The town cheers quietly and the base feels suddenly different. Several soldiers whisper that Morgan's rule was always rotten. Others remember their families harmed by Morgan's selfish punishments. Kobe says Marines should serve people, not serve brutal commanders. A sergeant lowers his sword and chooses to protect civilians. Helmeppo hides near the gate and grabs keys from a guard. He threatens to report everyone and demands a fast escape. Zoro steps closer and promises Helmeppo will face consequences. Luffy watches Helmeppo and senses another dirty trick coming. Helmeppo loads another round and aims at Kobe this time. Kobe freezes yet refuses to close his eyes again. Zoro takes one breath and prepares a finishing strike now. Luffy crouches and coils his arm like a spring. Morgan suddenly groans and pushes himself up from the rubble. His eyes burn with rage and he reaches for a fallen blade. The Marines gasp because the fight is not finished yet. Zoro sets his feet and everything goes deadly silent again. Morgan raises the blade and charges with a final scream. Morgan charges forward with a final scream and swinging steel. Luffy plants his feet and meets the strike with rubber arms. The blade rebounds hard and Morgan stumbles with shocked disbelief. Zoro steps in and slashes the ground to halt Morgan. Morgan roars and swings again and the crowd holds its breath. Kobe feels the air tighten and his knees want to buckle. Luffy shouts that tyrants fall when people stop fearing them. Morgan lunges at Luffy and aims for his head this time. Luffy ducks and stretches upward, delivering a crushing uppercut instantly. Morgan flies back and crashes beside the yard wall. For a heartbeat, everyone wonders if he will rise again. Then Morgan twitches and pushes up with pure stubborn rage. The Marines shift uneasily and fingers tighten on triggers again. Helmeppo sees his father moving and laughs like a trapped rat. He aims his pistol again and targets Kobe with hatred. Kobe steps forward anyway and refuses to run anymore today. Zoro turns fast and his eyes narrow with cold warning. Luffy snaps his arm out and flicks the pistol away. The gun spins and clatters and Helmeppo screams in panic. Helmeppo grabs a marine sword and waves it wildly around. He threatens to kill civilians unless someone gives him passage. Do you think Helmeppo deserves mercy after using fear like that? Comment below with your answer and smash like for courage. Subscribe now if you want more battles and big dreamers. A wrong move now could shatter Kobe's new resolve forever. Morgan staggers forward again and calls this base his kingdom. He swings at Zoro and the blades crash with violent sparks. Zoro holds steady and the third sword rests ready at his side. Kobe watches Zoro and senses discipline beneath savage reputation. Morgan forces Zoro back one step and grins with cruel pride. Then Zoro shifts and Morgan suddenly loses balance mid-swing. The yard falls silent and one mistake could end everything now. Zoro slashes Morgan's uniform sleeve and the axe hand falters. Somewhere above the yard a gull cries like a warning. Morgan snarls and charges again with a wild, desperate shove. Luffy appears beside him and delivers a heavy punch to ribs. Morgan coughs and drops the blade and his power cracks. Several Marines gasp and finally lower their weapons in shame. Kobe shouts that justice cannot live inside a bully's shadow. Some soldiers look away because they know Kobe speaks truth. Morgan tries to grab Kobe and snarl about obeying orders. Luffy blocks him and Morgan's fist sinks into rubber uselessly. Luffy spins and throws Morgan down with a clean hard slam. Morgan lies still and the base seems to exhale at once. But Helmeppo suddenly bolts toward the gate with stolen keys. Kobe hears his own heartbeat and waits for the next scream. Zoro chases and the crowd parts and someone screams behind. Helmeppo turns and throws a knife toward Rika without looking. Rika freezes and time feels slower than the ocean tide. Zoro dives and swats the blade away with perfect precision. The knife hits wood and everyone realizes Helmeppo crossed a line. Zoro lifts his sword and walks forward with silent fury. Helmeppo backs up and begs and promises anything to escape. Luffy steps in front and tells Zoro not to waste honor. Zoro breathes out slowly and lowers the blade with effort. A Marine sergeant grabs Helmeppo and binds his wrists tightly. The soldiers murmur because the command chain has collapsed completely. The crowd senses change but fears the backlash will be brutal. Kobe looks around and feels something inside him finally ignite. He tells the Marines he wants to join with honest service. He admits he was weak but chooses strength through discipline. The sergeant nods and says courage like that belongs here. Luffy smiles wide and says, "Kobe, you just became dangerous." Kobe blushes and wipes tears and salutes with shaking hands. Then the townspeople cheer and the fear begins breaking apart. Zoro's blades hum softly and promise consequences for betrayal. Zoro retrieves his swords and ties them back at his hip. Luffy offers his hand and asks Zoro to sail together. Zoro studies Luffy and sees fearless honesty without hidden chains. Luffy knows trust is rare and chooses it without hesitation. He says he will join, but he will keep his own goal. He vows to become the greatest swordsman and never lose again. Luffy laughs and says that sounds perfect for his crew. Kobe asks Luffy if piracy can ever be truly right. Luffy answers that freedom is right when you never hurt innocents. Kobe nods, yet knows his path will stay different from Luffy. The sergeant tells Kobe training will be harsh and relentless. Kobe accepts and asks Luffy to visit when he becomes strong. Luffy taps his straw hat and promises they will meet again. Zoro watches that promise and respects the loyalty in it. The sun lowers and the sea wind carries new beginnings. Luffy and Zoro walk toward the small boat waiting quietly. At the gate Helmeppo's eyes dart like snakes seeking exits. The town waves and Rika bows deeply to Zoro with gratitude. Zoro looks away and mutters that she should thank her courage. Luffy grins and invites everyone to chase dreams without apology. If you really like the story, comment below, so we can create more episodes daily. Which moment hit you hardest, the rescue or Kobe standing up? Like the video if you want Zoro and Luffy together again. Subscribe for the next adventure and tell us your favorite line. Luffy pushes off and the boat cuts through water smoothly. Zoro sits calm and listens to the creak of wood. The water beyond the pier looks calm but hides unseen threats. Kobe stands at the shore and salutes until they fade. Then Luffy points ahead and says the real sea starts now. Zoro closes his eyes and feels destiny pulling like a tide. A distant shadow crosses the horizon and the air turns heavy. Something out there is already moving toward them with hungry intent. Zoro asks what kind of captain laughs while facing death daily. The sea answers with dread and whispers, but that wasn't the worst part. He wakes from memory and grips the hat with fierce love. Zoro watches him and understands that dreams can be wounds. The sea grows rough and their tiny boat bounces hard. A shape appears ahead and laughter carries over the waves. Nami stands on a ship's deck and waves like bait. Behind her cannon mouths open and a clown flag flutters. Then a booming voice cries Buggy and the air turns deadly. Buggy's name echoes over waves and Zoro's eyes sharpen instantly. A clown flag flickers far away then vanishes behind mist. Luffy laughs because danger always sounds louder than it feels. Zoro warns that loud confidence attracts knives from unseen waters. Luffy shrugs and says every voyage needs a memorable first enemy. Their tiny boat bobs and wood creaks under restless swells. Suddenly a huge bird shadow glides over them like doom. Luffy looks up and grins at the strange flying thief. Before Zoro speaks the bird drops and snatches Luffy's hat. Luffy leaps upward and the bird grabs his whole body instead. Zoro reaches out but the bird beats wings and rises fast. And then the bird dives toward cannons, faster than screaming wind. The rope snaps loose and Zoro is left alone at sea. Zoro curses because every day with Luffy becomes a disaster. He rows harder and scans the horizon for any sign. Small pirate rafts appear and circle Zoro's boat like sharks. 3 buggy pirates climb aboard and demand surrender immediately. Zoro answers by drawing blades and the raiders freeze mid-step. They rush anyway and Zoro drops them with clean frightening strikes. One crawls back and claims Buggy will tear Zoro apart soon. Zoro asks who Buggy is and hears nervous superstitious whispers. They say Buggy ate a devil fruit and cannot be cut. Zoro narrows his eyes because legends often hide real tricks. Then the sea turns glassy and another raft bumps beside him. More buggy pirates pile in and swing clubs without skill. Zoro spins once and sends them flying into splashing water. He grabs their sail and turns his boat toward land quickly. The pirates whimper that Buggy rules Orange Town with terror. Zoro keeps rowing because finding Luffy matters more than warnings. High above the sea, Luffy wriggles in the bird's claws. He shouts at it and tries punching but hits only air. The bird screeches and carries him inland toward noisy smoke. Below him rooftops appear and cannons boom from a coastal town. A cannonball whistles past and the bird jerks in panic. Smoke trails behind a shot and the bird tilts wildly. He swings wildly and the rooftops rush closer every heartbeat. The bird drops lower and Luffy spots a girl running fast. She is Nami and she clutches a map like treasure. Then cannons fire again and the bird finally loses control. It releases Luffy and he falls toward streets with no mercy. Luffy screams happily because falling still feels like flying. He crashes through a roof and lands in splintered wooden debris. Villagers shout and scatter because pirates patrol every corner. Luffy pops up smiling and asks where the loud party is. Nami bursts into the ruined room and freezes seeing Luffy. She recognizes his straw hat and the grin of trouble. Luffy recognizes her eyes and the confidence of a survivor. Nami hisses that the street is trapped and pirates surround them. Buggy pirates flood the street and shout that Nami stole loot. Luffy steps out proudly and the pirates raise guns at him. He waves and asks if they saw a green-haired swordsman. The pirates answer with laughter and cock their rifles together. Gunfire cracks and Luffy dodges casually while Nami bolts away. Luffy stretches an arm and grabs Nami's wrist before she vanishes. He says she owes him the map and she bites back. Nami yanks free and sprints through alleys like practiced lightning. Luffy chases easily yet keeps his hat safe with one hand. Behind them pirates pursue and their footsteps drum like war beats. Nami turns sharply and shoves Luffy into a side street. A net drops above and tightens, and Luffy cannot move. Nami laughs breathlessly and says she never trusts pirates. Luffy struggles and the net stretches but refuses to break. Then a heavy shadow blocks the alley and laughter rolls closer. A pirate lieutenant appears and orders Nami captured alive tonight. Nami's grin fades because she planned to escape alone. She spins and throws dust then darts past the lieutenant's legs. The lieutenant grabs her hair but she elbows his ribs hard. Luffy snaps the net using strength and rubber stretch together. He lunges forward and smacks the lieutenant into stacked crates. Crates explode and fruit spills across stones like bright shrapnel. Nami stares because Luffy just saved her after she betrayed him. Luffy demands his map, and Nami's smile vanishes instantly. Nami hesitates and says Buggy will kill anyone for that map. Luffy says then Buggy can try because Luffy never runs. More pirates arrive and their faces show fear and excitement. They chant Buggy's name and drag a small cannon into view. Nami whispers that cannonballs here are not normal cannonballs. Luffy asks what she means and she answers with trembling urgency. She says Buggy uses a special bomb ball that erases buildings. Luffy grins wider and says that sounds fun, not frightening. Nami grabs his vest and screams that fun gets them killed. The cannon aims forward and the fuse is lit. Luffy braces and Nami's eyes widen at the burning fuse. Suddenly drums pound closer and a carnival laugh rattles windows. A booming laugh shakes windows and a clown silhouette approaches slowly. Far offshore Zoro rows alone while defeated pirates cling nearby. They beg for mercy and warn that Buggy hunts intruders. Zoro ignores them and keeps rowing toward the smoky coastline. Waves slap hard and the current pulls his boat sideways. He grips the oars and mutters that Luffy better survive. Another cannon boom rolls over water and Zoro turns sharply. He sees distant smoke and feels the town's fear rising. Back in the alley, Luffy stares at the clown silhouette ahead. Nami whispers that Buggy the Clown never forgives thieves. Luffy says thieves can change if they choose friends over gold. Nami swallows hard because the fuse hisses and hope shrinks. The silhouette steps into light and a grin spreads cruelly. Buggy's crew cheers and the cannon fuse burns down very fast. Luffy asks Buggy loudly why he hurts townspeople for fun. A pirate answers that Buggy wants treasure and demands obedience. Nami looks at Luffy and wonders why he challenges monsters. Luffy answers her doubt by stepping forward without hesitation. Nami tugs Luffy back as the cannon sparks again nearby. Luffy laughs and says he will stop it bare-handed. Buggy's laughter stops and the town seems to hold its breath. And just when relief seemed near, that wasn't the worst part. Then patrol shouts rise and the alley seems to shrink. Nami leads him through back streets toward a hidden warehouse. Inside the dim room, Buggy's pirates watch like hungry wolves. Nami shoves Luffy forward and claims she caught him alone. Luffy blinks confused and asks why she is selling him. Nami avoids his eyes and says survival needs hard choices. The pirates grin and chain Luffy inside an iron cage. Luffy shakes the bars and yells that this is unfair. Nami steps back while pirates cheer her fake loyalty loudly. Buggy's crew drags the cage outside for everyone to see. Villagers flinch as the cage scrapes stone like a funeral cart. Nami forces a smile, though her stomach twists with doubt. Then Buggy's shadow stretches across the floor like broken ribbons. Buggy steps out wearing bright colors and cruel painted smiles. He praises Nami and says betrayal is the finest performance. Nami bows slightly and hides her anger behind careful breathing. Buggy snatches the map and bites it like proof. Luffy shouts that friends do not trade friends for money. Buggy calls Luffy a clown act and orders drums beaten. Nami tells herself she will steal everything and vanish fast. Buggy points at a heavy cannon and smiles wider. He holds up a round bomb and calls it Buggy Ball. The crew loads it carefully and villagers gasp behind doors. Buggy announces this town will obey because fear is art. Then the fuse sparks and time feels suddenly too short. The cannon fires and the blast erases buildings in one roar. Dust floods the street and hot wind whips Nami's hair. Luffy stares wide-eyed yet still smiles at the spectacle. Buggy bows dramatically and demands applause from terrified townsfolk. Nami realizes this weapon could kill her with one mistake. Buggy orders Nami to light another fuse toward Luffy. Luffy taunts Buggy and says cages cannot hold his spirit. Nami hesitates and her buried conscience stings like salt. Buggy leans close and whispers that mercy is weakness here. A sword whistles nearby as someone lands atop a roof. Roronoa Zoro appears watching the cannon with narrowed eyes. Then Buggy's crew rushes him and steel flashes in chaos. Zoro cuts through attackers and asks where their captain stands. Buggy recognizes Zoro and boasts about his strange body power. Nami shouts that Zoro should retreat because he is alone. Zoro ignores her and drops beside the cage with steady focus. Luffy cheers and calls Zoro his future crewmate proudly. Zoro scowls and says he is nobody's follower yet. Buggy signals a circus swordsman to challenge Zoro immediately. The fighter rides a unicycle swinging blades with wild laughter. Zoro blocks the strikes though his earlier injuries still ache. Nami watches shocked as Zoro's strength refuses to fade. Buggy orders the cannon aimed again at the trapped Luffy. Then the fuse ignites and Nami's decision arrives like thunder. Nami lunges and smothers the fuse with her bare hand. Her palm burns and she bites back a scream. Buggy's smile drops and his eyes turn dangerously cold. He calls Nami a traitor and commands his crew attack. Did Nami's betrayal shock you? Comment, like, and subscribe today. If you really like the story, comment below, so we can create more episodes daily. Luffy shouts Nami's name and strains against the cage bars. Zoro slashes the unicycle and sends the swordsman crashing hard. The crowd gasps as Zoro stands trembling but unbroken. Buggy claps slowly and says tricks beat strength every time. Zoro charges anyway because pride will not let him stop. Buggy's body splits apart, dodging slashes with impossible angles. Then a flying hand stabs Zoro and blood darkens the street. Nami panics and grabs a ring of keys dropped nearby quickly. She searches for Luffy's lock while pirates swarm from all sides. Luffy yells that Buggy is hiding behind cheap magic again. Buggy laughs and sends his feet skittering separately across stones. Zoro grits his teeth and refuses to collapse from pain. He warns Nami that Buggy's parts can strike from anywhere. Nami backs away and spots a loose cannonball near the cart. She drags it toward the cannon as smoke curls overhead. Buggy notices and orders his men to seize Nami alive. Luffy twists his arms through bars and swats pirates away. Zoro staggers forward and tells Luffy to keep smiling. Then the street falls silent as heavy footsteps approach from shadows. A lanky tamer steps forward and cracks a whip with pride. Buggy's voice calls emoji and demands swift punishment. A huge lion named Richie pads out with heavy breathing. Villagers shrink back as Richie's mane bristles like wildfire. Nami grips the keys harder and feels her burned hand throb. Zoro sways but raises his swords again, refusing any surrender. Luffy widens his stance and tells Buggy he will win. Moji points at the cage and orders Richie to tear it. Richie lowers his head and charges through flying dust. The cage rattles as Luffy braces his feet against iron. Nami screams for Luffy to duck as claws slice air. Then the first impact hits and the street erupts again. Richie's claws slam the cage and iron screams under strain. Luffy bends backward and the bars bow like soft wire. Moji laughs and whips the air to push Richie harder. Nami yanks at the lock but the key slips from pain. Zoro staggers in front of her and blocks a sweeping paw. The lion strike sends Zoro skidding and blood trails behind him. Luffy stretches his arms out and punches Richie through the bars. Richie roars and stumbles, yet Moji orders another charge. The cage finally cracks and the door bursts open violently. Luffy tumbles free and lands smiling despite the chaos. Moji kicks Luffy into a wall and dust explodes outward. Then Buggy's laughter rises and the town seems to choke. Luffy stands up slowly and wipes grit from his cheek. He tells Moji that hurting friends makes fights personal fast. Moji points his whip and calls Richie the strongest beast. Richie lunges again and Luffy meets him with rubber strength. Luffy grabs the lion's mane and swings him into rubble. Moji gasps and snaps his whip across Luffy's face. Luffy barely flinches and steps forward with calm fury. Nami watches his focus and feels her plan slipping away. Zoro warns her that Buggy will return with worse weapons. Nami nods, yet her eyes keep measuring escape routes. A pirate rushes them and Zoro drops him with one cut. But Buggy's crew circles again and the air turns tighter. Luffy orders Nami to stay behind him for safety. Nami shouts she needs nobody, then hides behind him anyway. Moji commands Richie to bite and Richie's jaws snap shut. Luffy stretches his neck back and the bite catches empty air. He slingshots forward and headbutts Richie with a loud crack. Richie whimpers and collapses while Moji screams in disbelief. Moji charges, swinging his whip like a blade toward Luffy. Luffy catches the whip and yanks Moji off his feet. Moji hits the ground hard and the street falls silent. Then a cannon wheel creaks nearby and smoke curls ominously. Nami spots Buggy's men dragging the cannon toward them. Zoro tries to stand straight, but his knees shake badly. Luffy tells Zoro to rest and lets anger take over. He punches the ground and the shockwave knocks pirates backward. Nami grabs the cannon fuse and rips it out quickly. A pirate shouts orders and fires a rifle at Nami. Luffy blocks the shot with his arm and glares coldly. The pirate freezes and runs as fear replaces loyalty. Buggy appears on a rooftop and claps like a director. He praises Luffy's spirit and promises to break it soon. Nami demands her map back and Buggy waves it mockingly. Buggy says thieves belong in cages and laughs at her pain. Zoro lifts his blade and vows to cut Buggy down. Buggy splits apart again and dodges with floating limbs. One foot kicks Zoro's wound and Zoro nearly collapses. Luffy launches upward and snatches Buggy's head midair suddenly. Buggy's head smirks and shouts for his body to attack. Luffy gets slammed by a flying torso and crashes hard. But Luffy springs back and grabs two limbs at once. He knots them together and Buggy screams with shocked rage. Nami uses the distraction and snatches the map from falling hands. Buggy orders a retreat and his parts scramble away quickly. The pirates scatter, carrying the cannon into a wider square. Luffy chases, but Nami pulls him toward a side street. She says the town has a safer path to hide. Zoro limps after them, leaving red drops on stone. They reach a small pet food shop guarded by Chaochu. Chaochu growls at strangers and refuses to step aside. Nami tries to shoo him and Chaochu snaps at her fingers. Luffy kneels and speaks softly while the dog trembles. Chaochu stays planted like the doorway is sacred ground. A kindly mayor named Boodle arrives and scolds their noise. He sees Zoro bleeding and ushers him into his house. Boodle says pirates ruined everything, yet he refuses cowardice. Nami asks about Buggy and Boodle explains the town's terror. He says Buggy took the square and demands obedience daily. Luffy clenches his fists and promises to stop that cruelty. Then Chaochu barks wildly as Moji's shadow returns again. Moji staggers into view, angry and humiliated by defeat. He vows to burn the shop and punish the dog. Richie crawls behind him, bruised and whines from shame. Moji kicks Richie and orders him to stand and fight. Luffy steps forward and tells Moji to leave the dog. Moji laughs and throws a torch into the shop doorway. Flames catch instantly and Chaochu screams without retreating once. Luffy's face hardens and his voice drops to ice. He punches Moji across the street and sends him flying. Richie charges again and Luffy slams him into the dirt. The lion collapses and Moji crawls backward in panic. Nami watches Chaochu stare at burning shelves with heartbreak. Boodle shouts that the shop belonged to Chaochu's friend Hawker. He says Chaochu guarded it daily after Hawker died. Luffy hears that and his anger sharpens into resolve. He sprints through fire and grabs one box of pet food. Chaochu whimpers and Luffy places the box before him gently. The dog sniffs it and tears roll down his face. Then Moji flees toward Buggy's base, screaming for revenge. Nami admits quietly that Luffy's heart scares her sometimes. Zoro rests inside Boodle's house and grips his swords tightly. Outside, the sky darkens with smoke from the ruined shop. A distant boom echoes and the ground trembles under their feet. Boodle runs out and sees Buggy's cannon aimed at his home. Luffy shouts warning, but the fuse is already burning fast. The Buggy ball launches and tears through the air, shrieking. The explosion swallows Boodle's house and the street erupts again. Nami screams Zoro's name and dashes toward the flames. Luffy grabs her shoulder and says Zoro will survive somehow. But from the smoke a figure rises and steel glints. Zoro bursts from the smoke with ash coating his battered shoulders. He coughs once and plants his swords into cracked earth. Nami stares stunned and relief flashes across her guarded face. Boodle trembles beside the ruins and whispers that his town died. Luffy steps forward and asks Zoro if he can move. Zoro snarls that pain is nothing compared to losing pride. The rubble still burns and sparks drift across the street. Chaochu whines near the ashes and refuses to leave. Boodle drops to his knees and grips the dirt hard. He apologizes to Zoro because he dragged him into danger. Zoro tells Boodle that courage matters more than winning battles. Luffy turns toward the square and his eyes sharpen suddenly. Then the distant cannon wheels creak again behind drifting smoke. Nami grabs Luffy's sleeve and warns Buggy will fire again. Luffy says Buggy can try because he hates bullies. Zoro wipes blood from his chin and nods grimly. Boodle forces himself upright and says he will face Buggy. Nami argues that old men die first in pirate wars. Boodle answers that cowardice already killed his people slowly. He steps into the open street and shouts at Buggy's rooftop. Buggy appears laughing and points at Boodle like a toy. Buggy mocks the mayor and calls his bravery a cheap gag. Boodle grips a small cannon and aims with shaking hands. The crowd watches from windows and fear returns like choking fog. Buggy orders his crew to drag the cannon closer quickly. Then Boodle fires and the shot bounces harmlessly away. Buggy laughs harder and calls Boodle the town's funniest joke. Luffy clenches his fists and steps between Boodle and Buggy. Nami tells Luffy the treasure room is near Buggy's base. Luffy ignores the hint and stares only at Buggy's grin. Zoro shifts his footing and his wound threatens to reopen. Buggy signals and pirates pour in from side streets. Luffy stretches his arms and smashes two pirates into walls. Nami ducks behind debris and searches for a clean path. Boodle tries to help but his hands shake too much. Zoro slices down three attackers then staggers from blood loss. Buggy's parts split and swirl above them like vicious confetti. Then Buggy's detached foot swings toward Nami's head sharply. Nami rolls aside and the kick shatters a broken barrel. Luffy snatches the foot and yanks it hard. Buggy's head screams insults and orders his body to strike. Zoro leaps in and slashes a flying hand away cleanly. Buggy's hand still crawls and grabs Zoro's injured side. Zoro growls and stomps it down with brutal force. Nami sees Moji limping back and dragging Richie behind him. Moji points at Luffy and demands another chance for honor. Richie whimpers and refuses to meet Luffy's steady eyes. Buggy kicks Moji aside and calls him useless trash. Moji freezes and shame crushes his face into pale horror. Luffy steps closer to Buggy's head and speaks quietly. He says hurting townspeople makes Buggy weaker than any clown. Buggy laughs but his eyes twitch with dangerous rage. Then Buggy orders a buggy ball prepared for execution. Pirates haul the cannon into the center square with cheers. Villagers scream and scatter as the cannon muzzle rises. Nami grabs Luffy and says they must stop the cannon now. Luffy nods and dashes forward leaving dust behind him. Zoro follows limping yet refusing to stay behind again. Boodle shouts for them to use alleys to avoid the crew. Nami leads them through tight paths and calculates every turn. They emerge near the base gate and hear pirates chanting loudly. Buggy's voice booms and promises the town a final show. Luffy climbs a wall and peers over with fearless focus. Inside the square pirates surround the cannon like a shrine. Buggy stands above them and waves his map trophy proudly. Nami's eyes lock on the map and hunger sparks again. Zoro grabs her shoulder and warns greed can kill fast. Nami snaps back but her voice shakes with real fear. Then a guard spots them and raises an alarm instantly. Pirates rush the wall and swing clubs toward Luffy's head. Luffy stretches backward and the clubs smash empty air. He springs forward and knocks the guards into each other. Zoro drops down and clears a path with quick slashes. Nami slips behind them and heads toward the cannon controls. Buggy sees them and orders his crew to capture Nami alive. Luffy shouts that nobody touches Nami while he is breathing. Buggy's head floats closer and taunts Luffy about friends. Luffy punches the head and sends it spinning across the square. The body catches it midair and Buggy snarls in pain. Zoro charges the body and Buggy splits apart again. A leg blocks Zoro and a fist tries stabbing his back. Zoro pivots and cuts the fist then kicks the leg away. Nami reaches the cannon and searches for the fuse quickly. She finds fresh powder and realizes the shot will level everything. Boodle appears at the gate and yells for townspeople to run. Some villagers hesitate and then finally sprint toward the docks. Then Buggy orders the fuse lit and the crew obeys instantly. A pirate sparks the fuse and the flame races forward. Nami lunges and tries smothering it with torn cloth. The cloth ignites and Nami recoils as heat bites her fingers. Luffy sees her flinch and his rage bursts outward suddenly. He slams pirates aside and sprints toward the cannon fast. Buggy's torso blocks him and swings a heavy blade downward. Luffy stretches around it and head butts the torso with force. The torso stumbles and the blade slices only air. Zoro reaches the cannon and slashes the fuse line cleanly. The flame dies and the square goes silent for one beat. Buggy screams and orders everyone to kill them all. Pirates surge like a wave and steel glints everywhere. Luffy plants his feet and punches forward like thunder. Zoro spins and cuts a clear circle of safety. Nami backs up and clutches the map under her vest. She looks at Luffy and sees he still trusts her. Then Buggy's voice lowers and the air turns colder. Buggy says he will kill the mayor first as punishment. Boodle stands tall and refuses to step back even once. Buggy commands Moji to drag Boodle forward immediately. Moji hesitates and Buggy kicks him hard across stones. Richie growls softly and places himself between Moji and Buggy. Moji looks at Richie and his pride cracks open. Buggy laughs and orders Richie shot if he disobeys. Luffy glares and shouts that Buggy even abuses loyal beasts. Nami whispers that Buggy's cruelty never ends unless stopped. Zoro nods and says they strike Buggy before more innocents die. Luffy agrees and tells Nami to stay close and safe. Nami swallows and says she will handle the map later. The three move together and their unity shocks Buggy visibly. Buggy splits into pieces and swarms them from all angles. Luffy catches two parts and slams them together like hammer blows. Zoro slices a path and forces Buggy's parts to scatter. Nami grabs a loose rope and snags a flying limb. The limb yanks back and Nami almost falls into pirates. Then Luffy grabs her wrist and pulls her free instantly. Nami stares at him and something softens inside her. Buggy snarls and orders a retreat deeper into the base. Pirates grab the cannon and drag it back toward storage. Luffy chases and shouts that Buggy cannot hide forever. Zoro limps after him and blood drips steadily again. Nami runs beside them and clutches the map like lifeline. Boodle watches and realizes these pirates might save his town. Chao-Chu barks from afar and the sound feels like encouragement. The base doors slam and Buggy's laughter echoes behind wood. Luffy stops and smiles because the real fight is coming. Nami breathes hard and says Buggy will set traps inside. Zoro grips his swords and says traps are meant to be cut. The wind carries smoke and the town holds its breath. Somewhere inside the base a fuse sparks to life again. But that wasn't the worst part.
Everyone buys safety with money. He buys it with timing. A healer slips into Branica with one companion close. If the wrong eyes recognize him, the kingdom closes like a trap. The premise is simple: hide in a neutral city long enough to resupply. The stakes are brutal. One whisper can get innocents killed. Wait till you see how he becomes a lovely flower, on purpose, just to trap a sword hero in her own game. Kiarga keeps his hood low and his voice flat. Branica smiles with merchant teeth. The rule is simple: public violence becomes public punishment. The cost is worse. Every loud wind paints a target on Freya and the others. So he moves quiet, buys small, and watches hands, not faces. The first problem waits in their rented room. A demon girl stands by the window, ready to vanish. Normally you beg for trust and swear you're different. But that fails because demons have heard the same lie. So Kiarga offers a contract instead of comfort. Protection now, partnership later, and one shared goal. And it works because contracts have edges. So now she stays watching him like a judge, until she asks for proof he can stop an army. She gives her name at last, Eve. She speaks of Caladrius, a plague bird that can wipe armies. Normally, that means you summon it and win. But that fails because Caladrius demands trials in time. So Kiarga refuses to rely on miracles, because miracles arrive late. So now he builds power with what he can control. Until he realizes Branica itself is a weapon, he heals his face into a stranger and walks the streets alone. Normally you hide indoors and wait for danger to pass. But that fails because danger grows while you wait. So he scouts patrol routes, listens to tavern talk, and counts exits. And it works because patterns expose ambushes. So now he knows which alleys breathe and which alleys choke, until a stranger steps too close, smiling. The worst part is the man says Kiarga's name like a joke. Normally, you deny it and talk your way free. But that fails because bounty hunters don't guess. So Kiarga moves first and ends it silent. The proof is simple: the man never gets to shout. So now Kiarga returns before anyone follows the trail. Until he senses there were others watching, he tightens rules for the whole group. No inns that ask names, no long shopping, no drifting alone. Normally, a small victory lets you relax. But that fails because Branica punishes relaxation. So he spreads movement across the day. Freya shops at dawn. Setsuna shadows rooftops at noon. Eve stays hidden and listens. So now their footsteps don't form a pattern. Until morning brings smoke and angry voices, a small restaurant is smashed and looted. The owner shakes as he speaks. Bounty hunters demanded information, then wrecked the place for fun. At first it looks like a random crime. Normally that means you move on and protect your own. But he does the opposite because hunger is a weapon, and it works because cruelty repeats when ignored. So now Kiarga treats a meal like a declaration of war. They follow the trail into cramped back streets and find a hideout full of stolen goods and loud laughter. Normally, you call guards and let the law handle it, but that fails because the law is for sale here. So Kiarga hunts the hunters instead. The setup is clear: too many men, one whistle, one door to the street. The bad option is to rush in screaming and end it fast. That fails because screaming creates a crowd. So he enters like a shadow. He breaks the first wrist before steel clears the sheath. Setsuna drops the second with a knee to the ribs, and it works because removing choices ends fights. So now the room flips from ladder to panic. Until a hunter reaches for the whistle, don't blink, Kiarga pins the hand and kills the sound. The consequence is immediate: no alarm, no swarm. So now the rest freeze and start begging. Normally coin buys forgiveness in Branica, but that fails because Kiarga doesn't sell consequences. So he erases the worst of them and leaves the rest terrified to speak his name. So now the rumor in Branica changes. Until the rumor reaches ears that matter, Freya enters a magic shop to replace what the road has worn down. Normally you buy and leave before anyone remembers your face, but that fails because the owner watches too closely. So Kiarga acts ordinary while doing something impossible. He heals a cheap staff structure, tightening grain and stabilizing mana flow, and it works because his power rewrites damage even inside objects. So now the staff performs like a masterwork. Until the owner realizes what he just witnessed, the owner offers refunds, then offers more. A mithril sword appears like a bribe. Normally, you refuse gifts that create obligation, but that fails because they need steel and speed. So Kiarga takes the sword and leaves before gratitude turns into questions. So now the group's jeer is stronger, until the air outside changes with marching boots. A column enters Branica with banners and polished armor. Normally that means a royal parade, but Kiarga climbs for a rooftop check, and it works because height shows intent. So now he sees it isn't celebration, it's occupation. Until Princess Norn rides through the gate, smiling like she owns the city. Beside her walks Blade, a sword hero who doesn't bother hiding her arrogance. The worst part is she looks around like she's shopping for victims. So now Branica's neutrality dies in daylight, until Blade turns her head as if she feels him watching. The moment Blade enters Branica, the night stops being safe. Kiarga doesn't chase her, he studies her. Normally, you strike your enemy the second you see them, but that fails because Norn's soldiers would turn the street into a gallows. So he stays invisible and lets Blade reveal her habits. And it works because predators repeat patterns. So now he learns where she drinks, where she walks, and where she thinks no one can touch her. Until the rumors start changing tone, girls begin vanishing after sunset. Doors stay shut, lanterns go dark early. The worst part is people whisper Blade's name like it's weather. Normally, townsfolk report a crime and expect protection. But that fails because the soldiers here protect the princess, not the weak. So Kiarga treats this like a timer. Because every hour he waits, someone pays. So now he decides to force Blade into a private mistake, until Freya asks the question nobody wants to answer. How do you bait a sword hero without sacrificing someone? Setsuna's ears flatten with rage. Eva's eyes narrow, ready to disappear. Normally you use an ally as bait and hope you arrive in time. But that fails, because on time still means blood. So Kiarga chooses the only bait he trusts: himself. Suddenly he touches his face and heals his bones into a new shape. His shoulders narrow, his voice softens. His hair shifts. The worst part is how natural it looks. Don't blink, he becomes a woman. He names the disguise Kira, a single lovely flower meant to draw a knife. So now the trap is bait that can fight back. Until he has to walk into the city alone. He enters a crowded pub under warm lantern light. Music covers footsteps. Laughter covers lies. Normally that means you blend in and relax. But he does the opposite because predators love noise. So he sits where exits are clear and sightlines stay wide. And it works because control starts with position. So now he waits with a soft smile and careful eyes. Until Blade walks in like she owns the air. Blade spots Kira fast. She moves in with practice charm. She offers a drink. She talks like a friend. Normally you refuse and leave. But that fails because refusal makes you interesting. So Kiarga accepts and watches her fingers. And it works because fingers confess the trick first. So now he sees the tiny drop vanish into the cup. Until Blade leans closer, the poison hits like warm sleep. Kiarga lets his body go heavy on purpose. Normally you fight the drug and stand up fast. But that fails because standing up makes a scene. So he pretends to lose and lets Blade win. The consequence is immediate: her confidence blooms. So now she lifts Kira like stolen property. Until cold air bites outside, Blade drags Kira through narrow streets toward an inn. Normally you wake up and attack in the alley. But that fails because alley violence draws guards and witnesses. So Kiarga stays limp and listens instead. And it works because sound maps the route. So now he counts turns, steps, and doors. Until a desperate man rushes them from the dark. A father lunges forward with shaking hands, eyes full of grief. The worst part is courage like that gets people killed. Normally you let him strike the villain and call it justice. But that fails because Blade would cut him down instantly. So Kiarga snaps awake just enough to move. He drops the man with nerve strikes, not to protect Blade but to save the man's life. So now Blade sees a flicker of skill from prey. Until suspicion sharpens her smile. At first it looks like Blade is just playing. Normally, that means you can wait. But he does the opposite and tightens the trap. And it works because impatience makes predators sloppy. So now she pulls Kira into a room and locks the door. until she starts preparing control, not romance at first. It looks like Daard. Normally that means Ada. But Hida, and it works because Da. So now until Dada shows up. The worst part is this. Don't blink, then it gets worse. Blade binds Kira with practiced speed. She keeps Ragnarok close like a holy relic. Normally that means the plan failed. But that fails as a conclusion, because Kiarga wanted isolation. So he keeps acting frightened, letting her believe she's fully in control. And it works because predators relax when they feel safe. So now she leans in, confident and cruel, until Kiarga catches sight of the sword's aura. Ragnarok hums, and the air tightens. Blade's strength spikes when she grips it. Normally you trade blows until she tires, but that fails because Ragnarok feeds her stamina and recovery. So Kiarga waits for one specific mistake, her attention drifting from the blade. So now he holds still, letting her posture shift forward, until she tries to claim. The helpless flower hears the moment. If you're still watching, tell me in the comments. Should Kiarga end Blade fast or make her suffer for what she's done? And if you want the next payoff, like the video and subscribe. Suddenly, Blade notices something that makes her freeze. Her eyes widen, her breath stutters. The worst part is she understands the bait is a trap. Normally a villain screams for help, but that fails because pride keeps her quiet for one heartbeat. So Kiarga uses that heartbeat. He snaps restraints and shifts his body toward attack range. So now the rules change inside the room. It's no longer prey and predator. It's execution and escape, until Blade jerks for Ragnarok and the drug still drags on Kiarga's limbs. His muscles feel heavy, his vision swims. Normally, that means you lose the opening, but he does the opposite and commits anyway, and it works because hesitation is death. So now he lunges as Blade's hand closes on the sword, until Blade's lips curl into a grin. Blade's grin lasts 1 second, then Kiarga steals it. He moves first, because second place dies. Normally a sword hero wins by drawing faster, but that fails because Kiarga isn't racing the blade, he's racing the grip, so he strikes her wrist and knocks Ragnarok offline. And it works because power can activate without contact, so now Blade's swing is late, until she brute forces strength anyway. She grabs the sword again and the air tightens with pressure. The worst part is her body surges like a storm. Normally, you back away and reset distance, but that fails, because distance is where her swings become lethal. So Kiarga steps inside the arc and turns the room into a cage, so now her wide swings hit wood and stone, not flesh. Until Kiarga's fingers find the dagger he saved for this moment. The dagger flashes dull green. Poison, proof not threats. Normally a villain expects a fair duel, but that fails because Kiarga doesn't offer fairness. He offers consequences, so he drives the blade into her side, quick and deep, and it works because poison attacks the future, not just the present. So now Blade's breath catches and her rhythm breaks, until she tries to heal through Ragnarok like she always has. She reaches for the sword like a lifeline. Normally that means she snaps back with a grin, but her fingers tremble, so Kiarga hits the reaching arm, targeting joints. The consequence is immediate numbness, then weakness. So now Ragnarok is inches away but unreachable, until Blade's pride turns into panic. The worst part is panic makes her loud. Don't blink. Kiarga clamps a hand over her mouth and drags her down. Then it gets worse, he keeps it silent while the poison keeps working. Blade's legs stop obeying. She collapses. Normally this is where she recovers, but that fails because her arm won't close. So now the sword hero is on the floor helpless, until Kiarga makes the humiliation undeniable. He kicks Ragnarok away and steps on it like it's trash. Normally, taking a weapon is just a win, but for her it's stripping the mask. The proof is simple. She can't stand, she can't heal, she can't even crawl. So now her hunt ends in her own room, until footsteps pass in the hallway. Kiarga freezes for half a heartbeat. The city is full of soldiers tonight. Normally you flee out the window immediately, but that fails because rooftops can be watched too. So he listens, counts the rhythm, and waits for the patrol to move on, and it works because danger has a pattern. So now he slips out like a late guest leaving a party, until the street outside feels different. He stops at Carmen's little shop for one risky breath. Normally you avoid locals after a fight, but that fails because locals are how you measure heat. Carmen whispers that soldiers have been asking about strange potions and a traveler with too much money. So Kiarga buys one cheap item and leaves a different scent trail out the back, and it works because hunters follow what looks easiest. So now the first wave chases the wrong corner, until the real hunters start thinking lanterns flicker. People whisper. Norn's men are everywhere, and they're not just guarding, they're searching. At first, it looks like a normal patrol. Normally, that means you can blend in, but he does the opposite and tests their attention, and it works because real hunters track reactions. So now he sees which soldiers scan faces, not streets, until he senses one gaze that doesn't belong to ordinary guards. Hake, the knight who watches like a scholar. The worst part is he doesn't rush, he reads. Normally you sprint and hope speed saves you, but that fails because speed creates a trail. So Kiarga moves with crowds, cuts corners, and changes direction without stopping. So now ordinary eyes lose him, until Haki's eyes adjust and follow the pattern anyway. Kiarga reaches his allies without calling attention. Freya's there, face tight with fear. Setsuna crouches above, ready to strike. Eve waits in shadow, quieter than before. Normally demons run when humans bring armies, but she doesn't run because she just saw a hero fall. So now Eve commits to the alliance, until Kiarga admits the next problem. Blade is handled, but Norn is not. A princess with soldiers can erase lies without drawing a sword, so Kiarga chooses movement before sunrise. Normally that means you sleep and recover, But that fails because dawn is when hunters arrive, so he orders them to pack fast and leave by edge roads, not main gates. And it works because edges have fewer eyes, so now they slip toward the outskirts while the city still pretends to sleep. Until a distant horn changes the night's meaning. At first it looks like Daad. Normally that means Daden, but he does Daad. And it works because now. So now S until Dada shows up. The worst part is, don't blink, us. Then it gets worse, SS. The horn isn't celebration, it's a signal. Torches shift direction like they got new orders. Normally that would mean the search is widening, but Kiarga realizes the search is focusing on him, so he tightens spacing and keeps faces down. The proof is simple: a patrol cuts across their route, forcing a detour that costs time. So now they must move faster without looking like they're running. Until Haki appears at the far end of the street. Watching without blinking, Kiarga doesn't fight him here. Normally that feels like weakness. But that fails as a strategy, because ego gets you killed. So he slips into a narrow passage and disappears into a seam in the city. And it works because seams aren't on maps. So now the group escapes the tightest net. Until Kiarga hears a whisper that turns his blood cold. Norn isn't just hunting. She's the type to punish crowds to make a point. The worst part is innocence will suffer for his shadow. So Kiarga grips Ragnarok tighter and keeps moving, already planning the next strike. Until the princess decides to squeeze harder. But that wasn't the worst part. He doesn't win by shouting in the street. He wins by staying invisible, even while watched. Because in this city, noise gets you executed instantly. Wait till you see how one stolen memory starts a war. Kiarga is a healer who turns pain into leverage. Tonight he hides in Branica, a neutral, merchant city. The first rule is simple: public violence becomes public punishment. The second rule is worse witnesses can be bought like bread. So he must move like a shadow, not a hero. If he's recognized, the city shuts like a trap, and strangers die for the face they think they saw. The first problem appears inside a rented room, silent and tight. A sword hero waits by the window, ready to strike. Normally you retreat and bargain for a safe exit. But that fails, because her mission is murder, not talk. So Kiarga steps in close and grabs her wrist mid-draw. And it works because his healing can lock nerves on contact. Until her eyes harden, realizing he won't beg. Kiarga needs information, not applause, and he needs it now. Normally you threaten and hope fear breaks the target. But that fails because heroes are trained to endure pain. So he uses healing like a drill, forcing memory to surface. And it works because his power can replay sensation and intent. So now maps flash, orders echo, and names slip out. Don't blink, he sees the enemy Princess Norn. Until the memory shows a hawk-eyed knight tracking the streets. The worst part is the secret comes with instant consequences. Normally you stop and avoid drawing attention outside, but he does the opposite and finishes the search in one breath. And it works because hesitation is how traps close. So now the hero collapses, defeated, breathing hard on the floor. Until boots slow outside the door. Listening in her gear he finds a strange gemstone, cold and heavy. Normally you pocket it and run before anyone notices. But that fails because unknown magic becomes evidence later. So he presses it to his palm and feeds it healing energy. And it works because the stone reacts like living metal. So now it warms and sketches a weapon shape in his mind. Until the footsteps return closer, not passing by. Kiarga slips out through a back stair into market haze. Normally, you sprint when you feel hunted, but that fails because running makes civilians point at you. So he walks steady and buys fruit like nothing happened. And it works because calm looks innocent in a crowd. So now the patrol scans faces and moves on, frustrated. Until a loud merchant shouts about miracle medicine. Drawing eyes at first, it looks like the patrol will pass and forget. Normally that means you relax and breathe again. But he does the opposite. He keeps his posture loose and ready. And it works because relaxed bodies don't trigger suspicion. So now he blends into the crowd like another tired shopper, until a suspicious gaze snaps back toward him. The worst part is one glance can become a search order. Don't blink, he shifts one step, blocking the line of sight. Then it gets worse. Every whisper says his name, until eyes turn on him. Back upstairs, Freya waits, composed but ready to move. Normally you plan loudly and list every thread in detail. But that fails, because Branica sells secrets for cheap. So Kiarga speaks in code and points out exits with his cup. Until a polite knock announces a night. Downstairs the problem becomes social, not physical, and that's scarier. A man sits with perfect posture and friendly eyes. Normally you greet him like a customer and keep it shallow. But that fails because his gaze measures your heartbeat. So Kiarga lets him talk first and stays almost bored. And it works because power hates being treated as normal. So now the man calls himself Haki, a royal hunter. Suddenly he praises the potions and names their seller Carmen. He never raises his voice, yet the room feels smaller, because every word lands like a verdict. Suddenly, his men outside stop walking and start waiting. Then it gets worse. Freya senses they're blocking exits already, until he offers Kiarga a place in the army like a gift. At first, it sounds like protection and status with clean pay. Normally you refuse once and walk away smiling, but that fails because Haki treats refusal like a challenge. So he asks tiny questions to test if Kiarga is lying, and it works because details expose disguises faster than swords. So now Kiarga answers with fewer words, calm and flat. Then it gets worse. Haki schedules a sample for tomorrow, until Kiarga realizes this isn't recruitment. It's a leash. Kiarga returns to the room and stares at the gemstone again. Normally you hide it until the city crisis passes, but that fails because Haki will press harder next time. So Kiarga bonds the stone and shapes it into a clawed gauntlet, and it works because the gem remembers weapon forms from old magic. So now metal crawls over his forearm like liquid armor. Don't blink, he cuts his palm, then heals it mid-drop, until a horn moans beyond the walls, long and low at first. It looks like Haki's offer is just arrogance. Normally that means you refuse once and walk away clean. But he does the opposite. He treats refusal like an invitation. And it works because predators love a confident target. So now the meeting becomes a test, not a conversation, until Haki mentions the potion seller by name again. The worst part is the net is already tightening. Don't blink, Kiarga smiles once, hiding the alarm. Then it gets worse, tomorrow becomes today's countdown. Until the clock hits 0, the worst part is the horn isn't for soldiers. It's for the city to choose sides. Normally markets close and families hide indoors. But that fails because panic creates crowds and crowds create cover. So torches pivot, patrols roar out, and gates thunder shut suddenly. Windows slam and merchants hide their best goods under boards. Suddenly the same smiling faces turn blank and obedient. So now Kiarga keeps walking, spacing tight faces down, and it works because hunters look for runners, not walkers, until he spots Haki on a balcony, watching without blinking. Haki's stare pins Kiarga like a nail through cloth. Normally you stare back and signal you're not afraid, but that fails because confidence invites a test, in public. So Kiarga looks away first and keeps walking. And it works because predators hate losing the spotlight, so now Haki can't claim a reaction as proof. Until the city horns answer again, louder, closer, the streets tighten as if the stones learned fear. Normally, that means you run to the nearest safe room. But that fails because safe rooms are where names get written down. So Kiarga follows the moving crowd instead of escaping it. And it works because crowds hide single faces perfectly. So now he drifts toward Carmen's pharmacy like a customer. Until he sees soldiers already at the door. The worst part is they aren't searching randomly. They're counting bottles, scanning ledgers, sniffing labels. Normally Carmen would argue and demand a warrant, but that fails because authority here is its own warrant. So Kiarga steps in behind a loud merchant and waits, and it works because impatience makes soldiers careless. So now one guard complains about miracle sales, revealing the real target. Until Haki's voice carries from the corner. Calm and amused, Haki doesn't threaten Carmen with a sword, he threatens him with attention. Normally you try to deny everything and beg for mercy. But that fails because Haki enjoys watching lies break. So Kiarga slips a note into Carmen's hand mid-change, and it works because simple instructions beat panicked speeches. So now Carmen sees 2 words, leave now. Until Carmen hesitates, because fear makes you freeze suddenly. A new sound rolls in like thunder on wheels. Steel boots, banner poles, a marching line that doesn't belong in markets. Normally that means guards are moving for a routine crackdown. But that fails because this formation is an army, not a patrol. So Kiarga pivots toward an alley and pulls Freya with him. And it works because 2 steps early becomes 10 minutes saved. So now they reach a rooftop gap and look down. Until the first royal banner enters the square. Don't blink, the banner isn't for Branica, it's for Gerald. Then it gets worse. Norn arrives smiling like she's hosting a festival. She stands high, safe behind shields and polished men. Normally a ruler announces taxes or protection deals, but this ruler announces a purge, because she needs a clean enemy to unite the crowd. So now she labels the demi-humans threats and orders arrests, until civilians start pointing, desperate to look innocent. Kiarga's jaw tightens, but he doesn't move yet. Normally, you rush in and cut the first soldier down, but that fails because public killing becomes public execution. So he watches the chain of command instead, and it works because removing the head breaks the hands. So now he tracks the officers giving signals, until he sees Haki at Norn's side, smiling. The worst part is Haki's smile says, I knew. Normally you retreat and accept you're outplayed. But that fails because retreat leaves innocents trapped in the net. So Kiarga chooses a narrow rescue instead of a loud war, and it works because small wins keep you alive longer. So now he moves through back lanes, cutting ties and unlocking doors, until he hears a familiar scream from the square. That scream isn't random, it's Carmen. Normally Carmen would hide because he's just a merchant. But that fails because Haki drags him out as proof. So Kiarga pushes forward, fists clenched, breathing controlled, and it works because anger without timing gets you killed. So now he sees Carmen forced to kneel, accused of aiding criminals. Until Norn raises her hand like she's blessing a crowd. Suddenly, the soldiers strike not to punish but to erase. The worst part is the crowd doesn't stop it. Normally, you would shout the truth and expose the lie, but that fails because mobs prefer simple stories. So Kiarga swallows the urge to yell, and it works because silence keeps his identity sealed. So now he chooses a different weapon, fear, until Freya steps forward. Eyes hard, Freya understands instantly what must happen. Normally you hide behind Kiarga and stay safe, but that fails because safety is already gone. So she lifts her hand and casts an illusion. And it works because the kingdom's trauma has one face. So now Flare appears above the square, radiant and impossible, until the soldiers freeze, blinking like their world split. Don't blink, Norn's confidence cracks for 1 second. Then it gets worse. Haki's eyes widen, then sharpen, then calm, because he recognizes a trick and wants the source. So now his men start scanning rooftops and balconies, until Kiarga steps into the open anyway. At first, it looks like he's throwing away his disguise. Normally, that means you accept death and swing wildly. But he does the opposite. He walks straight, controlled, and quiet. and it works because certainty creates shock. So now he strikes one officer and steals his whistle, until the line of soldiers turns together, alerted. The worst part is the neutral city becomes a battlefield in one breath. Don't blink, Kiarga's gauntlet flashes as he blocks steel. Then it gets worse, he lets a blade cut his side on purpose, because he needs them close and confident. So now blood hits stone, and the crowd gasps, until he heals the wound instantly, smiling normally. A wound forces you back, but that fails because retreat gives them distance. So he uses the gauntlet's magic like a reset button, and it works because his body refuses to stay damaged. So now he takes a second hit, then erases it again, until the soldiers panic, realizing pain doesn't slow him. Suddenly, he turns defense into terror. He breaks weapons instead of bodies. Normally you kill fast to end the fight, but that fails, because dead soldiers create martyr stories. So Kiarga cripples hands, shatters blades, and disarms captains, and it works because living enemies spread fear better. So now the royal line staggers, losing rhythm, until Haki moves, finally stepping off the throne. Shadow. The worst part is Haki doesn't rush, he measures. Normally, you focus on the strongest enemy immediately, but that fails because Norn is still giving orders. So Kiarga targets the orders first and the ego second, and it works because chaos breaks command. So now he hurls the stolen whistle into the crowd, until soldiers chase the sound like dogs. That single trick opens a corridor. Freya uses the illusion again, brighter, closer. Normally illusions are distractions, not weapons, but that fails because fear can become a weapon. So the flare image speaks with royal authority, and it works because soldiers obey branding more than logic. So now half the army hesitates, waiting for Flare's command, until Norn screams to ignore it. Face twisting. If you're enjoying this ruthless chess game, answer this: would you expose Norn publicly, or crush her privately? Drop your choice in the comments, and if you want more twists like this, like and subscribe right now. Suddenly, the army turns angry at itself. The worst part is Norn adapts fast. Normally a spoiled princess would lose control and panic, but that fails because Norn isn't spoiled, she's brutal. So she orders fire and turns the square into a furnace, and it works because flames don't care about illusions. So now smoke blinds civilians and hides soldiers moving in, until Kiarga hears Freya cough behind him. Kiarga can't protect everyone at once. Normally, you grab your ally and flee the chaos, but that fails because Carmen is still kneeling in front. So Kiarga charges through smoke, shoulder lowered, and it works because the gauntlet lets him ignore wounds. So now he reaches Carmen just as a sword rises, until the blade drops faster than human reflex. Don't blink. Kiarga swings, but he's half a second late. Then it gets worse. Carmen collapses, eyes wide, breath gone. The world goes quiet inside Kiarga's head. Normally grief makes you freeze and fall apart, but that fails because freezing gets more innocents killed. So he closes Carmen's eyes with one finger, then stands. And it works because rage becomes clean focus when he chooses it. So now he turns toward Norn's platform, face unreadable, until Haki steps between them, smiling like a gate. Haki stands between Kiarga and Norn like a locked door. Normally you rush the door and trade blows fast, but that fails because Haki wants a public lesson. So Kiarga slows his breathing and shows zero emotion, and it works because calm steals Haki's advantage. So now Haki tilts his head, almost impressed, until he draws and the air snaps suddenly. The first exchange is too fast for civilians to follow. Normally you block high and retreat to regain balance, but that fails because Haki's arrows and blade control space. So Kiarga steps forward instead of back, forcing contact distance, and it works because close range ruins a marksman's rhythm. So now steel meets claw, sparks jumping off the gauntlet, until Haki twists and drives a clean cut into Kiarga's side. The worst part is Haki smiles at the blood. Normally, blood means you flinch and lose tempo, but Kiarga does the opposite. He lets the cut deepen, and it works because Haki believes the fight is decided. So now Haki commits to a finishing strike, confident. Don't blink. Kiarga's gauntlet glows and the wound seals mid-motion. Then it gets worse. Kiarga uses the same swing to grab Haki's wrist, until Haki realizes the injury was bait. Haki tries to disengage with raw speed. Normally that means you chase and overextend, but that fails because Haki punishes reckless steps instantly. So Kiarga breaks the ground plan instead of the man, and it works because a battlefield is also a weapon. So now he slams a heel down, cracking stone into an even footing, until Haki lands half a step wrong, balance shifting. Kiarga doesn't waste that opening. Normally, you aim for the throat and end it, but that fails because a dead legend inspires louder hunters. So he strikes the shoulder joint and deadens the arm, and it works because healing can also disrupt nerves. So now Haki's weapon dips for one dangerous second, until Haki switches hands and swings anyway. Suddenly the fight becomes a contest of rules. Haki fights like law, clean and absolute. Kiarga fights like a cheat code with a price. Normally that means the cheat wins by brute force, but that fails because brute force is predictable. So Kiarga wins by proof, not power, and it works because he makes Haki miss, then punishes the miss. So now Haki's stance collapses and he hits the ground hard, until Norn screams for soldiers to swarm. At first, it looks like the swarm will bury Kiarga. Normally that means you run before numbers crush you, but he does the opposite. He grabs Haki by the collar, and it works because the army won't risk killing their elite. So now Haki becomes a shield, alive and furious, until Kiarga steps straight toward Norn's platform. The worst part is Norn still thinks she's untouchable. Normally a ruler retreats behind guards and distance, But that fails because the illusion of flare still freezes half the square. So Norn orders fire again, trying to erase fear with chaos, and it works because flames break formations. So now smoke thickens and screams scatter, until Kiarga reaches her, close enough to hear her breathe. Norn tries to speak like a princess. Normally, that means she threatens your family and future. But that fails because Kiarga already lost both once. So he grabs her jaw and forces eye contact, and it works because healing is strongest at contact range. So now he pushes into her mind and rips out memories, until the truth hits like a hammer. Here is the twist that changes the target instantly. Kiarga doesn't see just a cruel ruler. He sees the architect behind his village's ruin. Normally, revenge would end with a blade through her chest. But that fails because death is an escape from consequences. So he chooses a punishment that keeps her breathing, and it works because his power can rewrite identity like rewriting ink. So now the battle stops being about Brennica alone, until Norn's past reveals Leonard's orders and the chain of blame. Kiarga's hands tighten, but his voice stays flat. Normally rage makes you shout and lose control, but that fails because loss of control is what enemies want. So he speaks one sentence, then starts the procedure, and it works because precision beats emotion. So now Norn's pupils shake as her memories scramble, until her screams change tone softer. Confused, Kiarga builds a new persona inside her mind. Normally, you imprison a royal and demand ransom, but that fails because the kingdom would trade her for corpses. So he erases Norn and leaves Ellen, a harmless little sister mask. And it works because a broken identity can't command an army. So now her posture collapses, and she clings like a lost child. Until the soldiers stare, unsure who they're protecting. The city square turns strange and silent. Freya drops the illusion for a second and scans faces. Normally you celebrate and shout victory, but that fails because victory is when snipers aim. So Kiarga orders a retreat pattern with hand signals, and it works because his team moves like one body. So now Setsuna cuts a path through smoke fast and low, until a new voice calls out from the haze. Korea steps in, sword ready, eyes sharp. Normally she would attack first and ask later, but that fails because she senses the army's confusion. So she demands the truth with her blade half raised, and it works because authority respects certainty. So now Kiarga gives her a short explanation and a choice, until Korea sees Ellen clinging and realizes something is deeply wrong. At first, it looks like Korea will reject them on principle. Normally that means she reports everything to her order, but that fails because her order serves the same rotten system. So she chooses the harder path and stays, and it works because she saw the purge with her own eyes. So now the group has a knight-level sword at their side, until Brannica's leaders start counting the dead and blaming survivors. The worst part is Carmen is gone and nobody can fix that. Normally you bury the pain and move on fast, but that fails because unspoken grief turns into mistakes. So Kiarga returns at night to a quiet grave and places flowers, and it works because honoring one good man keeps him human. So now Freya stands beside him, silent, hands clenched, until Kiarga promises that the debt is paid, not forgotten at first. It looks like they can rest after winning. Normally that means you sleep and heal and wait for dawn. But that fails because the kingdom answers loss with a bigger hunt. So Kiarga decides to leave immediately and start the next route, and it works because moving first steals the enemy schedule. So now they pack light, keep faces covered, and avoid main roads. Until Ellen asks in a small voice where they're going. The worst part is how normal the question sounds. Normally you would flinch, remembering who she used to be, but that fails because hesitation invites suspicion inside the team. So Kiarga answers calmly and treats her like she truly is Ellen. And it works because consistency locks a new identity in place. So now Freya and Setsuna exchange a look, uneasy but steady, until Eve speaks up about the road ahead. Eve's goal becomes the compass now. Normally you would chase revenge only straight and loud, but that fails because revenge without direction gets you surrounded. So Kiarga agrees to follow Eve's next step while staying hidden, and it works because one journey can serve two purposes. So now the group leaves Brannica behind, smoke fading into distance, until a royal messenger reaches the capital with the news. At first it looks like the kingdom will deny everything. Normally, that means they bury the incident and blame bandits. But that fails because Norn's absence is too loud. So King Prim explodes with fury and demands a hunter. And it works because anger moves resources fast. So now he calls for Bullet, the man tied to Kiarga's worst suffering. Until Bullet smiles. Already imagining the chase. The worst part is Bullet doesn't hunt for duty. He hunts for pleasure and proof. Normally that means the road becomes a simple pursuit. But that fails because Kiarga learned to turn pursuit into a weapon. So the next journey begins with traps, disguises, and new rules. And it works because every step forward is also a step away. So now the team walks into a wider world, heavier and more dangerous, until the shadow of Bullet reaches the same roads behind them. At first, it looks like they escape the kingdom's reach. Normally that means the danger is finally shrinking, but the danger is only changing shape. So the quiet after Brannica becomes a countdown again, and it works because fear keeps them sharp and moving. So now Kiarga checks the horizon like it can bite, until he feels it's someone hunting with experience, not luck. The worst part is the hunter knows his name. Don't blink, because the next meeting won't be a negotiation. Then it gets worse, because this enemy wants him alive, not dead. Everyone buys safety with gold, he buys it with pain. A healer should save lives, but his gift is a leash. Refuse once and they punish him instantly. Break once and nobody cares, because he's replaceable. Wait till you see how he turns their victory prize into a rewind that flips the whole board. Kiaru is the kingdom's healing hero, dragged wherever soldiers bleed. The setting is a royal war machine that worships champions and discards helpers. The rule is simple: heal whoever they point at, whenever they demand. A second rule is hidden as healing forces him to feel the wound and the memory behind it, so each rescue becomes another scar inside his head. Because of that, survival means silence, observation, and timing is the only weapon they can't confiscate. Now the first problem hits in a war camp full of screams. Normally, a healer would be guarded and thanked. But here, hands shove him forward like cargo. The bad option is to heal fast and hope they stop. That fails because faster just becomes the new minimum. So Kiaru heals while watching everything. Because watching is the only freedom left, and it works because nobody notices a quiet man learning. So now he memorizes who gives orders, who carries keys, who enjoys cruelty, until a captain snaps his fingers and calls for the medicine again. The worst part is the medicine isn't to help him, it's to tame him. Now the next problem is a sweet drink pressed into his hands under guard eyes. Normally you swallow to survive the moment, but swallowing makes him foggy and foggy makes him obedient. The bad option is to refuse because refusal feels brave. That fails instantly because refusal earns chains and blows. So Kiaru drinks and lets his face go empty, storing the taste for later. And it works because emptiness looks like surrender. So now they think he's broken exactly the way they like, until he wakes up hours later and realizes he lost time again. Suddenly, he hears a calm voice in the dark. Normally that would be a hallucination from the drug, but the voice offers a gift, an eye that sees truth. The bad option is to ignore it and accept the fog. That fails because the fog will keep him owned forever. So Kiaru accepts the power, and the world's lies become visible. And it works because truth gives him a plan. So now he can predict the next dose and the next trap, until the camp shifts into celebration and the Oros arrive smiling. At first, it looks like victory is finally close. Normally, that means everyone relaxes and lowers their guard. But he does the opposite, because celebrations hide knives. And it works because he watches who drinks, who boasts, and who threatens. So now he spots the princess's allies before they speak, until the princess herself steps in calm and polished. The worst part is her kindness sounds like charity, not respect. Don't blink, her sweetness is a blade. Then it gets worse, she tightens the leash. Now the problem turns personal because she talks to him like he's a pet. Normally you nod and keep your head down, but that means you survive today and die inside tomorrow. The bad option is to plead for mercy because mercy sounds possible. That fails, because mercy here is a costume she wears for fun. So Kiaru answers softly, hides his eyes, and keeps listening. And it works because she wants a quiet toy, not a loud one. So now she stops paying attention to his thoughts, until she orders him dragged back to the front line like a bag of tools. Suddenly, the next problem is the battlefield itself, loud and filthy. Normally, this is where heroes shine and healers support. But here, this is where Kiaru gets used until he collapses. The bad option is to stand still and obey every shout. That fails because the shouts never end. So Kiaru moves with purpose, healing only what keeps people fighting. And it works because commanders only care about bodies staying upright. So now he buys seconds of breath between screams, until a wounded soldier grabs him and drags him into blood. The worst part is the soldier begs, and Kiaru feels the terror like it's his. Now the problem becomes the curse of his own power. Normally healing is relief, but for him healing is pain plus memories stacked in his ribs. The bad option is to shut down emotionally, because numbness sounds protective. That fails because numbness makes him slow and slowness gets him hit. So he forces focus, turning the agony into information. And it works because pain shows him the map of the body. So now he starts noticing something terrifying: healing can copy what it touches. Until the war reaches the Demon Lord's stronghold, and the air turns heavy. Don't blink, this is where the Varos reveal their real faces. Now the problem is simple and impossible: the Demon Lord can erase them all. Normally a healer would hide behind shields, but hiding fails because the Demon Lord's power breaks shields like paper. The bad option is to run because running is natural. That fails because there's nowhere to run in a siege. So Kiaru stays just behind the champions, healing at the exact seconds they would drop. And it works because timing turns weakness into endurance. So now the heroes keep swinging, and the Demon Lord keeps losing ground, until Kiaru sees it, a treasure pulsing near the throne. Suddenly, the next problem is greed, not war. Normally you grab the prize the moment it appears, but grabbing it openly fails because everyone will notice the healer reaching first. So Kiaru waits, watches the strongest hero lunge, and tracks the rhythm of the fight. And it works because the fight is a distraction no one questions. So now he knows the exact instant the Demon Lord will fall, until the Demon Lord collapses, and the camp roars with victory. The worst part is victory is when they tighten chains again. At first, it looks like victory ends the nightmare. Normally that means the healer finally breathes. But he does not celebrate, he hunts the stone. And it works because nobody watches him during speeches, so now his fingers reach the Philosopher's Stone, until a soft hand clamps his wrist and stops him. The worst part is the grip belongs to Princess Flare. Don't blink, her smile promises punishment. Then it gets worse, she calls for his medicine again. Her smile says he's still property. Normally, that means he swallows the dose and forgets again. The bad option is to panic, because panic shows guilt. That fails because guilt gives her a reason to tighten control. So Kiaru lowers his eyes and plays weak on purpose. and it works because she loves weakness. So now she turns away already satisfied, until the guards shove a cup to his lips. Now the problem is the drug, watched by two men. Normally, you swallow to survive the moment, but swallowing makes him foggy, and foggy makes him obedient. The bad option is to refuse. That fails instantly, because refusal earns chains and blows. So he sips, coughs hard, and lets it spill into his sleeve. And it works because a coughing healer looks harmless. So now his mind stays sharp while he staggers, until a guard grabs his chin and checks his throat. Suddenly, the next problem is proof. Normally, the spill would end the inspection, but this guard wants to look useful. The bad option is to argue. That fails, because arguments sound aware. So Kiaru fakes a seizure and collapses, foaming with spit. And it works because fear of sickness makes soldiers step back. So now the guard opens the tent flap for air, until that opening becomes Kiaru's exit. Now the problem is the camp outside, loud with victory. Normally, you run away from crowds, but he does the opposite. He moves toward the prize, and it works because nobody expects the healer to steal. So now he slips behind the champions and reaches the trophies, until the philosopher's stone chills his palm through cloth. The worst part is the prize is smaller than the pain it caused. At first, it looks like the celebration will hide him. Normally, that means he can vanish in plain sight. But he does one calm motion. He palms the stone and bows, and it works because cheers drown tiny movements. So now the stone is against his skin, hidden and real, until Princess Flare brushes his wrist like she's checking ownership. The worst part is her touch is a reminder, not affection. Don't blink, he keeps smiling anyway. Then it gets worse. She orders him taken to rest. Now the problem is escaping with evidence before the next dose. Normally, you stash the prize and wait for night, but waiting fails because she'll drug him before he wakes. The bad option is to fight the escort. That fails because public violence brings public execution. So Kiaru walks obediently, counting turns and tents, and it works because obedience makes guards lazy. So now he guides them toward a rear storage hut with fewer eyes, until the door shuts and leaves him with one tired sentry. Now the problem is one key and one throat that can shout. Normally you wait for sleep, but waiting fails because patrols check before dawn. The bad option is to strike with fists. That fails because armor is loud and hard. So Kiaru grabs the sentry's wrist and heals an old injury the wrong way, flooding his nerves with shock. And it works because pain is faster than steel. So now the sentry drops, shaking, unable to scream, until Boots paws outside the door. Don't blink, this is the narrowest second of his life. Now the problem is the coming inspection. Normally you hide and pray, but praying fails because checks are routine. The bad option is to open the door first. That fails because the hallway has witnesses. So Kiaru presses the philosopher's stone to his palm and focuses on one command: rewind. And it works because his healing can restore what reality breaks, even time. So now sound reverses, scars burn, and the room folds inward, until the world drags backward through every humiliation he ever swallowed. At first it looks like he's dying all at once. Normally that means the end. But he does what he always does, he heals through it. And it works because healing stitches the tearing timeline. So now years collapse into a blink, and his body rebuilds younger, until he wakes on an earlier day with the same memories intact. The worst part is the past feels clean even though it's poison. Don't blink, this time he's awake inside the cage. Then it gets worse. He remembers exactly when the cage closes. Now the problem is staying clear before the handlers drug him. Normally a trapped man panics and lashes out. But that fails because early violence gets him killed. So Kiaru plays obedient and heals his own organs at night. And it works because poison can't bind a body that keeps rewriting itself. So now the doses dull him less and less, until the handlers increase the amount, suddenly testing his limits. Now the problem becomes attention. Normally attention is good for heroes, but for him attention is a spotlight on a trap. The bad option is to act fearless. That fails because fearless looks unnatural on a broken healer. So he acts humble, heals quietly, and steals tiny fragments: stamina, balance, grip. And it works because every helpful heal copies a sliver of strength. So now his hands stop trembling when he's ordered around, until he realizes the target is not the war, it's the princess. Suddenly the rules change from surviving to erasing a threat. Normally he would wait for the demon lord again, but now he wants Flare gone before she can ruin him. So he studies her schedule, her escorts, her blind spots, and it works because he remembers everything she thinks he forgot. So now he chooses the cleanest entry, a trusted commander's face, until he heals his features into Leonard's shape and walks the corridor unchallenged. Now the problem is words, not guards. Normally, a disguise fails when someone asks a personal detail. The bad option is to talk too much. That fails because extra words reveal cracks. So Kiaru keeps answers short and steady and reaches her door, and it works because authority sounds simple. So now he steps into her room, alone with her at last, until Flare tilts her head and asks a question only Leonard should know. Flare tilts her head and waits for the answer. Normally this is where a disguise collapses. The bad option is to guess, because guessing invites death. That fails because royalty punishes uncertainty. So Kiaru answers with the calm tone she expects from Leonard. And it works because confidence is a costume people believe. So now she lets him step closer, one breath too long, until she raises a hand to cast, smiling. Now the problem is magic at arm's length. Normally she paralyzes people and calls it discipline. The bad option is to let her finish the spell. That fails instantly because one spell ends everything. So Kiaru closes the door softly, disables the call bell and grabs her wrist. And it works because control starts with silence. So now he ills, the casting muscles the wrong way, locking her fingers in pain, until her mouth opens to scream anyway. The worst part is she still thinks she's untouchable. Now the problem is time before anyone hears a sound. Normally you'd threaten and explain, but explaining fails because speech is wise seconds. So he whispers one line she can't deny, he remembers everything. And it works because truth hits harder than threats. So now fear breaks through her pride, until fear turns into bargaining. Suddenly sweet at first, it looks like she will offer anything to survive. Normally that means apologies, deals, and fake tears. But he does not bargain, he changes the rules. And it works because he isn't here to win an argument, he's here to race a threat. So now he chooses a colder revenge than death. He rewrites the person who can accuse him, until he realizes the palace still needs a princess. To see walking, the worst part is living is the punishment he chooses. Don't blink, he starts the rewrite. Then it gets worse because healing becomes editing. Now the problem is reshaping memory without breaking her loudly. Normally memory fights back. The bad option is to leave her mind intact and rely on fear. That fails cause fear fades and revenge grows. So Kiara stitches new paths over old ones, sealing old triggers as healed. And it works because her body accepts healing as truth. So now her eyes lose their sharpness and her voice loses its bite, until she repeats a new name when he gives it Freya. Suddenly, the next problem is escape with a living witness beside him. Normally you run, but running fails because running creates witnesses. So Kiaru makes Freya walk calmly, head lowered, like an attendant following orders. And it works because obedience looks ordinary in this palace. So now they slide into servant corridors where faces matter less. Until the real Leonard turns the corner, returning early. Don't blink, this is the mirror walking toward him. Now the problem is two identical commanders in one hall. Normally that means instant exposure. The bad option is to talk it out. That fails, cause guards will grab both and ask later. So Kiaru strikes first, drops Leonard with a fast nerve hit, and keeps him alive. And it works because a living scapegoat tells a cleaner story than a corpse. So now he plants the simplest scene. Leonard looks guilty and Freya looks like a victim. Normally framing needs papers, seals, and perfect timing. The bad option is to overdo details, because details create contradictions. That fails because contradictions invite real investigators. So Kiara keeps it brutal and simple. Leonard's signet, a torn sleeve, and the drug scent on his collar. And it works because guards prefer the easiest explanation. So now the blame sticks fast, even before questions start, until a patrol rounds the corner and demands to see the commander immediately. At first, it looks like they can slip away before anyone checks. Normally that means take the nearest exit and vanish. But he does the opposite. He leaves signs that pull the search away from the gates. And it works because people chase the loudest story first. So now the palace hunts Leonard, not the healer. Until the gatehouse begins checking lines, suddenly tightening control. The worst part is the palace loves public punishment. Don't blink, Kiara turns calm into camouflage. Then it gets worse because Freya's face could still spark recognition. Now the problem is the final barrier, bored soldiers with sharp eyes. Normally you need papers, seals, and an escort. The bad option is to force your way out. That fails, because force triggers alarms and arrows. So Kiaru blends into a supply line, leaving at dusk, moving with carts. And it works because guards check cargo, not faces. So now they pass the first barrier with a lazy wave, until one guard hesitates at Freya's face shape. Suddenly the next problem is recognition. Normally you run when someone hesitates, but running fails because running becomes proof. The bad option is to threaten him. That fails because threatened men shout. So Kiaru offers a quick heal for the guard's aching knee, gentle and efficient, and it works because gratitude replaces suspicion in one breath. So now the guard smiles, steps aside, and waves them through, until a shout rises behind them. Leonard has been found in a mess. Now the endgame payoff lands. The princess who owned him is gone, replaced by Freya walking at his side. Normally, that would feel like the end. But for Kiaru it's the first move. So he steps beyond the walls with a stolen future and enemies who don't know what changed. And if you were in his place, would you choose mercy or revenge? Comment your answer. And if you want the next arc, like and subscribe. At first it looks like freedom at last. Normally that means you breathe and stop looking back. But he does not stop scanning corners. And it works because hunters follow the careless. So now every road is a test of patience, until a new rumor reaches them: the kingdom is gathering heroes again. The worst part is those heroes will eventually cross his path. Don't blink because the next arc gets crazier. Then it gets worse, because someone out there recognizes his healing style. That's only chapter 1 out of Manhwa. But that wasn't the worst part. A hunted healer slips into a lawless city with one ally. If the wrong eyes recognize them, they die instantly. He has one plan: steal a fighter without starting a war. Wait till you see how he turns a burning house into a cage. Kiarga is the man walking first, controlled. Lanarita is the city that smiles with knives. The rule is simple: public violence brings public executions. The second rule is worcy: every bystander can be a paid witness. So he moves like a shadow and speaks like a customer. The cost of a mistake is not just his life, it's Freya's life and every innocent nearby too. They enter at dawn with traders and carts. Normally, you'd head to the nearest inn and rest. But inns are nets because names get asked. So Kiarga buys street food and listens from the edge. And it works because gossip loves free bread. so now he learns which streets are watched. Until a patrol turns the corner and scans faces, Freya stiffens when armored boots pass close. Normally you'd lower your gaze and look harmless, but that fails because fear looks guilty here. So Kiarga looks bored like he belongs, and it works because bored men don't run, so now the patrol walks past without stopping. Until one guard squints at Freya's hair, Kiarga shifts one step blocking the angle. Normally, you'd drag Freya away fast, but that draws attention, because bodies bump and heads turn. So he slows down and turns into a cloth stall, so now they reappear looking like shoppers. Until a vendor shouts, "Auction today!" At first it sounds like background noise and cheap entertainment. Normally, you ignore it and keep moving. But Freya's face tightens because she knows what auctions mean. So Kiarga follows the sound at a distance, and it works because distance lets him count guards. So now he sees a fence platform near a stone warehouse. Until the crowd swells and traps them in motion, coins flash, laughter rises, and cruelty gets called business. Normally, someone decent would speak up and stop it. But speaking up fails because armed men want an excuse. So Kiarga stays quiet and studies exits, rooftops, and hands. And it works because calm eyes spot hidden blades. So now he notices archers tucked behind wagons, until the seller drags out the prize. A wolf-eared demi-human girl is shoved onto the stage. Bruises mark her arms and chains bite her wrists. Normally, a captive would lower her head to survive, but she lifts her chin and glares back suddenly. So the crowd laughs because defiance is entertainment, and the seller promises obedience with a grin. Until the girl spits at him fearless at first. It looks like a simple auction. Normally that means you can just walk away, but he does the unthinkable and bids anyway, and it works because gold is louder than swords. So now the chain is in his hand, until a patrol notices the transfer. The worst part is the crowd cheers the cruelty. Don't blink, someone starts following them. Then it gets worse, steel flashes in the alley. Freya whispers that they should free her, instantly. Normally, you'd rush the stage and cut the chain. But that fails, because guards would cut down civilians first. So Kiarga chooses the ugly method, he bids higher. And it works because greed beats morality in Lenarita. So now the seller's smile widens. Until another buyer raises the price, Kiarga doesn't blink. He doubles the offer. Normally that would trigger suspicion about his motive. But suspicion fails when money talks louder. So the seller declares the deal and hands over the chain. And it works because the law here protects gold. So now Kiarga holds the chain, not the girl. Until guards close in to escort them away, the demi-human jerks back and snaps like a trapped wolf. Normally you'd tighten the chain and drag her, but that fails because pain makes her fight harder. So Kiarga loosens the grip just enough to breathe, and it works because freedom is leverage. So now she follows a step, testing him. Until she lunges trying to bite his hand, Kiarga twists his wrist and avoids the bite cleanly. Normally you'd slap her and assert control, but that fails because it proves you're the same as her captors. So he says one line cold and steady, "I'm not your owner," and it works because she hears no lie in it. So now she freezes for a heartbeat, until she growls, "Then why buy me?" Kiarga answers with truth, not comfort. Normally you'd promise safety and kindness, but promises fail because Lanarita taught her to hate words, so he offers a deal, revenge for cooperation. And it works because revenge is something she understands. So now she stares, weighing the trade, until she asks what he wants in return. He says he wants a partner who won't break under pressure. So he offers purpose, not comfort. And it works because purpose doesn't pretend, until she hears Freya's voice and flinches. Freya steps closer and keeps her hands visible. Normally, someone kind would rush to hug the victim, but that fails because touch can feel like a cage. So Freya speaks softly and gives space, and it works because respect is rare here. So now the girl exhales, but her eyes stay wary, until footsteps pace behind them again. They cut through alleys to shake the tail. Normally you'd run and create distance, but running fails because runners get chased. So Kiarga walks normal speed and changes directions often, and it works because tails get impatient. So now the follower shows themselves at a corner, until steel clicks behind them. At first it looks like the tail gave up. Normally, that means you're safe for a minute. But he does a slow turn into a tight dead end, and it works because hunters step into traps, so now he can see their intent. Until a knight blocks the only exit. The worst part is her badge screams authority. Don't blink, her blade is already moving. Then it gets worse, she demands the girl behind him. A knight steps in like a wall, cape heavy, gaze colder than stone. Normally, you'd play innocent and deny everything, but denial fails against a hunter who already decided. So Kiarga shifts his stance and moves Freya behind him, and it works because he prepares before the strike. So now the knight's blade is the only thing shining. She says, "Hand her over," and her blade slides free. Then, the blade whistles, and the alley shrinks around them suddenly. Normally, you'd meet steel with steel and gamble strength, but strength fails here because the knight is faster. So Kiarga gives ground and drags the fight into tighter space, and it works because tight walls cancel wide swings. So now her first slash bites only brick, until she changes angles and aims for Freya. Freya raises a hand, but she doesn't want blood. Normally, hesitation gets you punished instantly, but Kiarga uses that hesitation as a shield, not a flaw. So he steps between them and taps the knight's wrist, and it works because healers know nerves like wires. So now her fingers numb for one heartbeat, until she snarls and kicks him away. The knight recovers with pure training and lunges again. Normally you'd retreat and run for a crowd, But crowds fail because crowds become witnesses. So Kiarga signals the wolf-eared girl to strike low. So the knight pivots and smashes the attacker back, until Kiarga throws a coin pouch past the knight's shoulder. The wolf girl hits the wall and slides down coughing. Normally rage would make her charge again, but rage fails, because this knight reads rage like a book. So Kiarga tosses that pouch like bait. So now the knight's gaze flicks for a split second, until Kiarga is already behind her. He locks her elbow and twists not to break but to pin. Normally, you'd finish the enemy fast and end it. But ending it fails because killing a knight triggers a city-wide hunt. So he forces her to the ground and binds her with rope. So now the hunter becomes the captive, until footsteps and voices surge toward the alley. At first, it looks like they should drag her and run. Normally that means sprinting through streets and praying. But he does the smarter thing, he vanishes through a back door, and it works because the city has exits for smugglers. So now they're inside a cramped storeroom, until the owner hears noise and reaches for a bell. The worst part is One Ring summons guards. Don't blink, Kiarga presses a blade to the bell hand. Then it gets worse, he offers payment in silence. Normally you'd plead and try to explain everything, but explanations fail because loyalty blocks hearing. So Kiarga speaks first and keeps it simple. And it works because simple words leave less room to twist. So now the knight listens, eyes burning, until she blurts Freya's identity and demands surrender. Kiarga refuses to argue about names in a dirty room. Normally you deny, but denial fails because the knight believes her own story. So he offers proof instead, watch what your comrades do here. And it works because seeing breaks fantasies. So now he drags the knight to a cracked window, until armored men in the street start shaking down a merchant. A squad collects fees with smiles that don't reach eyes. Normally a loyal knight would defend them instantly. But the merchant's child crays and the soldiers laugh. So the bound knight stiffens, confused and angry. And it works because cruelty is louder than uniforms. So now her certainty wobbles. Until a commander arrives with polished armor and a grin, he walks like the street belongs to him. Normally, you'd confront him and demand justice, but confrontation fails because crowds fear rank. So Kiarga forces the knight to watch silent. So now she sees the commander take a bribe and order more collection. Until he points at the merchant's daughter, the commander's men grab the girl, and the father drops to his knees. Normally, the knight would rush out and cut them down, but rushing fails because dozens more soldiers wait nearby. So Kiarga pulls her back and whispers, "Not yet." And it works because timing saves more lives. So now the knight trembles with restraint, until the commander's eyes flick toward their building. They retreat through back alleys as the commander's patrol spreads. Normally, you'd split up and vanish, but splitting fails because informants sell sightings. So Kiarga keeps the group together and chooses the dirtiest routes. And it works because pursuers avoid filth and darkness. So now they slip past a search line, until a whistle screams and boots turn their way. The wolf girl bares fangs, ready to explode again. Normally you'd let her fight to release anger, but that fails because one fight becomes 10 fights. So Kiarga puts a hand on her shoulder and gives one command, save it. And it works because she wants revenge more than chaos. So now she holds back shaking, until the commander is already hunting personally. The whistle rises and faces turn toward them suddenly. Normally you'd cut through the crowd and disappear, but that fails because the commander is already hunting personally. So Kiarga steers them into an empty lodging house at the end of the lane, and it works because pursuers want to corner prey. So now the door shuts behind them, until the commander orders his men to surround it. At first, it looks like they can still talk their way out. Normally that means bargaining and promising surrender. But he does something bolder, he lures them into a spectacle. And it works because the commander wants a dramatic capture. So now the crowd starts gathering to watch, until the commander laughs outside and lights a torch. The worst part is the crowd is watching like it's theater. Don't blink, Kiarga bars the front door from inside. Then it gets worse, he pours oil along the floorboards. This is the moment the rules change for the bound knight suddenly. She isn't watching a rumor anymore, she's watching evil in uniform. Normally her mission would be, return Freya, no matter what. But that mission fails, because the commander's cruelty is the bigger threat. So her target shifts from the fugitives to the commander. And it works because her conscience finally beats her orders. So now she nods once, choosing to fight beside them, until the commander laughs outside and lights a torch, before the flames climb. Quick question, would you trust a knight who just switched sides? Comment your answer, and if you want more recaps like this, like and subscribe. The torch hits the oil, and fire races across the entry suddenly. Normally you'd smash a window and jump out, but jumping fails because archers wait for silhouettes. So Kiarga forces them deeper toward the back rooms. And it works because enemies guard obvious exits. So now they crawl through smoke low and fast, until the commander's voice comes closer. Counting rooms, Kiarga points to a back storage door and forces it open. Normally that room would be a dead end. But dead ends fail only when you didn't choose them. So he pulls everyone inside and blocks it with a fallen shelf. And it works because the commander will rush him blind. So now the heat presses from every wall. The ceiling cracks above them. Then, smoke presses like hands on their throats, instantly. Normally, you'd freeze and pray for air, but prayer fails because fire doesn't negotiate. So Kiarga points low and forces slow breathing. And it works because calm keeps lungs working. So now Freya steadies her magic without wasting it, until the shelf door starts shaking from kicks. The commander's men slam the wood again and again. Normally you'd brace the door and wait, but waiting fails because the ceiling is already weakening. So Kiarga does the opposite and opens it himself, and it works because surprise flips pressure. So now the first soldier stumbles into the room, blinded by smoke, until Setsuna hits him like a storm, until two more push him behind him. The commander doesn't rush in yet, he orders someone else to do it. Normally, that means he's cautious, but caution fails when ego gets insulted. So Kiarga taunts him with silence and makes his men fall faster, and it works because commanders hate losing control. So now the commander steps closer, voice louder, until he sends a hostage into the corridor again. A terrified civilian is shoved forward, trembling. Normally heroes drop weapons and beg, but begging fails because this man feeds on mercy. So Kiarga drags the civilian back into safety first, and it works because removing the hostage removes the leash. So now the commander's trick dies in his hands, until he switches tactics and orders the whole house burned down. At first, it looks like the fire will swallow everyone. Normally, that means you smash a window and jump, but he does something smarter. He uses the fire as a wall, and it works because walls can trap enemies too. So now Kiarga pours the last oil into a tight circle, until the commander steps over it, chasing his wind. The worst part is he thinks flames only hurt victims. Don't blink. Freya flicks wind and the ring ignites. Then it gets worse. The dead end becomes a cage. The ring of fire rises around the commander's boots, sudden and bright. Normally, a man would retreat and regroup, but retreat fails because Kuriha blocks the doorway behind him. So he lunges at her, desperate to break out, and it works for a second, because desperation is unpredictable. So now sparks fly as steel meets steel, until Setsuna slams a fallen beam into the gap, sealing it. Now the commander is trapped between fire, blade, and smoke. Normally he would order his men to rush in anyway, but rushing fails because no one wants to die for his pride. So his soldiers hesitate at the flame line, and it works because fear finally points at him. So now the commander realizes he's alone, until he tries to break past Kuriha with brute force. Kuriha ends the struggle with one clean strike, not fancy, just final. Normally she would arrest and drag him to court, but court fails in a city like this. So she cuts him down before he can scream again, and it works because decision kills hesitation. So now the commander's reign ends in ashen silence, until the building groans and starts collapsing. Kiarga doesn't celebrate, he counts seconds. Normally you'd check wounds and talk about what happened, but talking fails because fire is still moving. So he forces everyone through a back hatch he prepared earlier, and it works because he planned before the flames. So now they spill into an alley, coughing and alive, until whistles and boots flood toward the smoke. At first, it looks like guards will catch him in minutes. Normally that means hiding and blending in, but he does something bolder. He turns the crowd into cover, and it works because crowds argue louder than they watch. So now Freya smears soot on her face, and Setsuna pulls a hood up, until someone recognizes Kuriha's disciplined stance. So now they slip through a market lane while merchants shout prices. At first, it looks like the patrol will spot them. Normally, that means you run, but he does the dumb-looking thing and freezes, and it works because movement draws eyes. So now the patrol keeps walking, until a merchant's finger starts to rise. The worst part is one shout becomes 10. Don't blink. Kiarga forces Kuriha to limp. Then it gets worse. Another patrol turns the corner, until a patrol pushes into the same lane from the other side. So now the danger slides past them one breath at a time, until the wolf girl whispers, "Am I free?" Kiarga answers without softness, because softness can lie. Normally, someone would promise forever and safety, but forever fails in a kingdom that hunts you. So he says, "You're free if you choose us." And it works because choice is the opposite of chains. So now Setsuna nods once, teeth clenched, steady, until she asks who they fight next. Kuriha finally speaks, voice rough with shame and resolve. Normally she would return to her order and report, but reporting fails because her own leaders will bury her. So she asks to stay and swing her sword for the right reason, and it works because she has seen the truth with her own eyes. So now Kiarga gains a blade that can cut armies, until Freya warns that the kingdom will notice this fire. At first, it looks like they won and bought time. Normally, that means you sleep and recover, but he does the opposite. He moves before sunrise, and it works because the first hunters arrive at dawn. So now they pack fast and leave Lanarita's edge roads, until a messenger bird lands on a broken signpost. The bird carries a royal seal, heavy and bright. Normally that means simple orders and routine patrols, but routine fails when the crown is afraid. So Kiarga reads one line and his eyes harden, and it works because he understands threats like tools. So now Freya turns pale as the message names the healer directly, until the note adds a second line, colder than the first. It says villages will burn until he surrenders alive, and it says the hunt is only beginning. But that wasn't the worst part. Everyone begs the kingdom for mercy. He brings a receipt for every crime. A healer walks into a town square where fear is sold like bread. The scaffold is dressed like a festival. The soldiers smile like actors. The villagers stand packed together like livestock. If he strikes too soon, he gets exposed instantly. If he waits too long, the soldiers turn this crowd into a graveyard. Wait till you see how he turns their public execution into a trap for the executioners, and how that blood trail leads him straight to the demon lord he swears he already faced. Kiaruga keeps his hood low and his face calm. In this place, calm is a disguise. The setting is the Jiral Kingdom's justice, staged in daylight for maximum terror. The rule is simple: if you resist in public, they punish you in public. The second rule is worse witnesses can be bought, and victims can be blamed. The cost is brutal. Every second he hesitates, innocent lives get spent, and every loud victory paints a target on his back. So he stands at the edge of the crowd and watches hands, not speeches. The first problem appears fast. The executioners parade prisoners forward, and the captain talks about sin, with a grin. Normally, you keep your head down and pray it ends quickly. But that fails, because the show is designed to escalate until someone breaks. So Kyoruga looks past the captain and counts the hidden pieces. And it works because a trap always needs support. So now he notices extra soldiers spaced like a net, until a herald raises a scroll and the crowd goes silent. The second problem hits. The soldiers don't just want the prisoners dead, they want the villagers afraid enough to obey forever. Normally, people would shout and beg for mercy. But that fails because mercy is not on the menu today. So Kyoruga shifts his stance, placing himself where he can reach the platform in 3 steps, and it works because distance is the difference between rescue and regret. So now he can move without pushing civilians. Until a random guard taps a post with a hidden signal. Don't blink, bows lift from rooftops where no archers should be. The aim is not the criminals, the aim is the crowd. Normally, you run the moment you see bows rise, but that fails because a stampede is what they want. So Kyoruga moves forward instead like a man with permission, and it works because confidence splits crowds faster than fear. So now he's close enough to strike the source, not the symptoms. Until the captain gives the smallest nod. Suddenly, the first volley threatens children near the front. Normally, the guard line would protect them, but that fails because the guard line is the shooter's shield. So Kyoruga attacks the captain's side like lightning, breaking the rhythm of command. And it works because leaders are the spine of cruelty. So now the captain stumbles and the script tears. Until the soldiers shout that the healer is the criminal, the third problem appears. The kingdom flips the story instantly. Normally, people trust uniforms and doubt strangers. But that fails because everyone just saw the bows aimed at villagers. So the crowd hesitates, unsure what to believe, and it works for the executioners because confusion buys time. So now soldiers push civilians backward and point spears at the front row, until a faint shimmer forms around the platform. The worst part is the shimmer isn't just light, it's a magical barrier. It locks the space and squeezes the air. Normally, that means the attacker's strength gets drained until he can't stand. That is exactly what they planned. So Kyoruga feels his muscles grow heavy, like chains on his bones, and it works for them because they prepared this field in advance. So now every second costs him power. Until the princess behind him steps forward without fear. She doesn't speak first, she acts. Normally, magic user would panic when a barrier turns on, but that fails because panic feeds the trap. So she presses her hand to the barrier and pushes her power the opposite way, and it works because the same door can swing both directions. So now the drain reverses, and the executioners begin to weaken instead, until their faces change from smug to terrified. Normally, you would try to arrest them and prove the truth, but that fails, because this kingdom doesn't allow trials that hurt nobles. So Kyoruga cuts through the ring of guards with ruthless precision, and it works because the barrier keeps reinforcements out. So now the executioners are isolated on their own stage, until one of them grabs a villager and holds a blade to their throat. Then it gets worse. The soldiers start striking civilians to punish resistance. Normally, saving the crowd would mean stopping the attackers without spilling more blood. But that fails, because the attackers don't care who dies. So Kyoruga chooses the ugly solution: remove the executioners first, fast before the killing spreads. And it works because fear collapses when the boss falls. So now the crowd starts to turn, rage replacing shock, until Kyoruga feels something wrong that isn't steel or fire. The next problem isn't a blade, it's time. He notices villagers swaying, coughing, collapsing without being touched. Normally you would think it's panic, but that fails, because panic doesn't make lips turn gray. So he grabs a fallen man and reads the truth through healing, and it works because his power reveals what happened inside a body. So now he realizes the villagers were fed poison hours ago, long before the scaffold. Until he understands the trap's final cruelty, most of them were already dying. The poison truth hits like a punch. Normally, you would think you can still save the crowd if you win the fight. But that fails, because the fight was never the main weapon. So Kyoruga drops to his knees beside the fallen bodies and heals with brutal focus. And it works because healing shows the damage while it fixes it. So now he sees the poison eating them from the inside, hours ahead of the scaffold, until he realizes the executioners planned a timed death. No sword could stop. The next problem is choice. There are too many collapsing at once. Normally you try to save everyone and call it heroism. But that fails, because spreading his power thin means he saves no one. So he picks the youngest boy he can reach and pours everything into him. And it works because one full cure beats 10 half cures. So now the boy coughs, blinks, and clings to life, until the rest of the crowd begins to drop like dominoes. Don't blink, panic finally breaks. Normally the soldiers would restore order by helping the weak, But that fails because the weak were always meant to die. So the executioners start cutting down villagers openly to erase witnesses faster. And it works for them because terror silences mouths. So now Kieruga's job changes from rescue to punishment. Until the captain screams that the healer started the massacre. The worst part is how believable a uniform sounds. Normally people would grab the stranger to earn favor. But that fails because grief turns into rage when the lie is too obvious. So Setsuna, the wolf girl, snaps forward and shields the boy with her body. And it works because predators don't negotiate with cowards. So now the front line of villagers sees who is protecting them. Until a soldier swings at the boy anyway, then it gets worse. Kieruga is forced to show exactly what kind of man he is. Normally, you would disarm and spare enemies to look righteous. But that fails, because sparing them lets them kill more civilians. So he cuts the executioners down with cold efficiency, one after another, on their own stage. And it works because fear collapses when the untouchables start falling. So now soldiers begin stepping back instead of forward. Until the executioners trigger the barrier again in pure desperation. Don't blink, the barrier flares, trying to drain him a second time. Normally that would mean he slows, gets pinned, and dies under numbers. But that fails because Freya pushes her magic harder and flips the drain into a surge. So the executioners stagger as their strength leaks away. And it works because their trap is now draining them in public. So now the crowd can see the Oli justice is just a dirty tool. Until Freya makes the most dangerous decision possible, she steps into full view and drops the disguise of being a nobody. Normally, hiding is how you survive the kingdom. But that fails because hiding lets the kingdom write the story. So she raises her voice and claims the authority the crowd recognizes, speaking like the first princess. And it works because the crowd has been trained to listen to royalty. So now she points at the executioners and exposes the corruption behind the spectacle. Until the villagers, already poisoned and grieving, snap into fury, the next problem becomes uncontrolled revenge. Normally, you would stop a mob before it becomes a second crime. But that fails because the executioners built this anger themselves, and it's finally pointing the right way, so Kieruga lets the crowd surge, not to enjoy it, but to end the killers without wasting more time. And it works because numbers beat armor when fear is gone. So now villagers swarm the remaining executioners and tear them down, until the last soldier tries to flee with proof of who ordered this. Don't blink, Kieruga intercepts him, not with a speech but with a question and a threat. Normally the soldier would spit and die loyal. But that fails, because people break when they realize their bosses won't save them. So the soldier blurts out that this was arranged by higher hands in the capital, and it works because terror loosens tongues. So now Kieruga understands the target isn't one town, it's the kingdom's chain of command. Until he realizes something even worse, the future he remembers is starting to slip. At first, it looks like victory. Normally that means you breathe and stop looking back. But he doesn't breathe, he listens. Because victory is loud and loud draws hunters, so now he moves the survivors away from the square before soldiers regroup. Until the boy he saved grabs his sleeve and calls him a hero. The worst part is the word arrow still feels like poison. Normally, you would accept the thanks and soften. But that fails because softness gets you caught. So Kieruga gives the boy one instruction: stay quiet, stay moving, trust no uniform. And it works because survival advice lasts longer than comfort. So now the group slips out with the crowd's chaos as cover, until wanted whispers begin forming before ink even dries. Then it gets worse. Freya's power starts cracking her own magic staves from the inside. Normally, you would buy another staff and keep going. But that fails because her power keeps growing and weak tools will keep breaking at the worst moment. So Kieruga sets a new rule for their journey: they need divine grade weapons. And it works because planning turns panic into a path. So now they aim for Branica, the city where humans and other races pretend to live in harmony. Until the gates reveal the real danger: a bounty board packed with fresh names and fresh prices. Normally, you would turn around the moment you see money on your head. But that fails, because every road is watched now. So Kieruga walks in anyway, calm and ordinary. And it works because fear looks guilty, but calm looks invisible. So now they blend into the streets, searching for supplies and information about a demon lord he once faced, until a warm restaurant door opens, and a quiet woman inside lifts her gaze like she has been waiting for him. The restaurant feels safe for half a second. Warm light. People pretending the world is normal. Normally, that means you lower your shoulders. But that fails because hunters love places where guards relax. So Kieruga counts exits before he counts chairs, and it works because escape is a habit, not a plan. So now he sees the woman in the corner, calm posture, sharp eyes, silence that scares loud men, until her gaze locks on him and doesn't blink. The first problem is recognition. He remembers her from another life, but details are wrong. Normally that would mean he's mistaken. But that fails because his instincts don't lie this hard. So he tests her with a title, Demon Lord. And it works because real power reacts even when it's hiding. So now the room laughs, but her eyes narrow. Until he notices her hair is black, not silver. Don't blink, his mind recalculates. Normally, meeting the Demon Lord means meeting the final boss. But that fails because this is her before the crown. So the goal changes instantly. He doesn't need to defeat her, he needs to secure her future. And it works because moving fate is stronger than chasing it. So now he keeps his voice calm and his hands still. Until the door slams and armored boots flood the room. Then it gets worse. Bounty hunters walk in like they own the place. Normally you deny knowing the target and let them pass. But that fails, because their eyes are already on the woman. So Kyoruga stays seated, waiting for the first greedy mistake. So now the leader points and names a price, until a hidden shooter outside fires without warning. Don't blink, the arrow hits the woman, and her body locks up instantly. Normally an arrow means lethal damage, but that fails here because the poison is meant to paralyze. So the hunters rush in, sure the job is done, and it works for them because poison is cheap courage. So now the whole restaurant freezes, until Freya releases her power in public. The worst part is public magic makes you memorable. Normally you hold back to stay hidden, but that fails because hidden means helpless. So Freya throws a pressure wave that slams attackers into tables and walls, and it works because force creates space. So now Setsuna darts low, dropping the fastest men first, until more hunters block the exits from the street. At first, it looks like they're trapped. Normally, that means you fight your way out and leave bodies behind, but he does the opposite. He extracts the target and vanishes. So now Kyoruga lifts the paralyzed woman and slips through a side door into an alley, until a second team is waiting there with chains. Don't blink, Kyoruga hits the chain holder first. Normally you'd threaten and demand they back off, but that fails because hunters don't have pride, they have quotas. So he breaks hands, knocks mouth shut, and clears the alley in seconds. And it works because removing options ends fights fast. So now they reach a hidden corner with the woman's breath turning shallow, until the poison starts freezing her lungs. The next problem is time pressure. Normally, you hide first and treat later, but that fails because paralysis becomes suffocation. So Kyoruga heals immediately, forcing the poison out through reversal, and it works because his power rewrites damage. So now her fingers twitch, her eyes focus, and she pulls in air like she's waking from drowning, until she stares at him with suspicion. The worst part is trust is rarer than medicine. Normally you soothe her with kindness, but that fails because kindness sounds like bait when you've been hunted for years. So Kyoruga tells the dangerous truth, he met her in a future that hasn't happened yet. So now she laughs once, sharp and disbelieving, until he proves it with one precise detail about her path. Then it gets worse, she realizes he isn't guessing. She gives her name, Eve Reese. Normally that name would be safe in a mixed city, but that fails because her people are being erased on orders from the current demon lord. So she admits the bounty exists because someone powerful wants her gone. So now Kyoruga sees the bigger game, protect Eve and you create a future rival to the current demon lord, until he makes his offer with teeth. Normally a hero would promise peace, but that fails because peace is a lie here. So he offers a deal, stay with his group, grow stronger, survive long enough to claim the throne she's meant to take, and it works because desperation respects structure. So now Eve agrees to travel with them, even while doubting his story, until the city answers with consequences. Don't blink, word of the restaurant fight spreads. Normally you pay a fine and move on, but that fails because hunters will keep coming. So Kyoruga turns cleanup into an upgrade. He replaces Freya's broken staff and reinforces it so it won't shatter again. So now they are armed, fed and moving, until Kyoruga sees royal colors entering Branica like a blade sliding from a sheath. Suddenly the threat becomes unavoidable. Norn's forces march into the city, and Blade walks with them, smiling like pain is a hobby. Normally, you'd run the moment you spot a royal column, but that fails because running confirms guilt and closes exits. So Kyoruga turns cold and starts planning first strikes, not escapes, and it works because wars are decided before swords swing. So now the question is lethal: does he hide Eve and lose initiative, or hit the royals first and risk turning Branica into a battlefield? If you were in his place, would you protect Eve openly, or use her as bait to wipe out the royal squad? Comment your answer. And if you want the next arc, like and subscribe, because once those royals step deeper into this city, every secret becomes a bounty. Then it gets worse. Someone in that army recognizes Freya's face, until the first royal order is shouted across Branica. But that wasn't the worst part. Everyone buys safety with money. He buys it with timing. A healer slips into Branica with one companion close. If the wrong eyes recognize him, the kingdom closes like a trap. The premise is simple: hide in a neutral city long enough to resupply. The stakes are brutal. One whisper can get innocents killed. Wait till you see how he becomes a lovely flower, on purpose, just to trap a sword hero in her own game. Kyoruga keeps his hood low and his voice flat. Branica smiles with merchant teeth. The rule is simple: public violence becomes public punishment. The cost is worse. Every loud wind paints a target on Freya and the others. So he moves quiet, buys small, and watches hands, not faces. The first problem waits in their rented room. A demon girl stands by the window, ready to vanish. Normally you beg for trust and swear you're different, but that fails because demons have heard the same lie. So Kyoruga offers a contract instead of comfort. Protection now, partnership later, and one shared goal. And it works because contracts have edges. So now she stays, watching him like a judge, until she asks for proof he can stop an army. She gives her name at last, Eve. She speaks of Caladrius, a plague bird that can wipe armies. Normally, that means you summon it and win, but that fails because Caladrius demands trials in time. So Kyoruga refuses to rely on miracles, because miracles arrive late. So now he builds power with what he can control, until he realizes Branica itself is a weapon. He heals his face into a stranger and walks the streets alone. Normally you hide indoors and wait for danger to pass, But that fails because danger grows while you wait. So he scouts patrol routes, listens to tavern talk, and counts exits. And it works because patterns expose ambushes. So now he knows which alleys breathe and which alleys choke, until a stranger steps too close, smiling. The worst part is the man says Kiarga's name like a joke. Normally, you deny it and talk your way free, but that fails because bounty hunters don't guess. So Kiarga moves first and ends it silent. The proof is simple: the man never gets to shout. So now Kiarga returns before anyone follows the trail. Until he senses there were others watching, he tightens rules for the whole group. No inns that ask names, no long shopping, no drifting alone. Normally, a small victory lets you relax, but that fails because Branica punishes relaxation. So he spreads movement across the day. Freya shops at dawn. Setsuna shadows rooftops at noon. Eve stays hidden and listens. So now their footsteps don't form a pattern. Until morning brings smoke and angry voices, a small restaurant is smashed and looted. The owner shakes as he speaks. Bounty hunters demanded information, then wrecked the place for fun. At first it looks like a random crime. Normally that means you move on and protect your own, but he does the opposite because hunger is a weapon, and it works because cruelty repeats when ignored. So now Kiarga treats a meal like a declaration of war. They follow the trail into cramped back streets and find a hideout full of stolen goods and loud laughter. Normally you call guards and let the law handle it, but that fails because the law is for sale here. So Kiarga hunts the hunters instead. The setup is clear: too many men, one whistle, one door to the street. The bad option is to rush in screaming and end it fast. That fails because screaming creates a crowd. So he enters like a shadow. He breaks the first wrist before steel clears the sheath. Setsuna drops the second with a knee to the ribs. And it works because removing choices ends fights. So now the room flips from ladder to panic. Until a hunter reaches for the whistle. Don't blink. Kiarga pins the hand and kills the sound. The consequence is immediate: no alarm, no swarm. So now the rest freeze and start begging. Normally coin buys forgiveness in Branica, but that fails because Kiarga doesn't sell consequences. So he erases the worst of them and leaves the rest terrified to speak his name. So now the rumor in Branica changes. Until the rumor reaches ears that matter, Freya enters a magic shop to replace what the road has worn down. Normally you buy and leave before anyone remembers your face, but that fails because the owner watches too closely. So Kiarga acts ordinary while doing something impossible. He heals a cheap staff structure, tightening grain and stabilizing mana flow. And it works because his power rewrites damage even inside objects. So now the staff performs like a masterwork. Until the owner realizes what he just witnessed. The owner offers refunds, then offers more. A mithril sword appears like a bribe. Normally, you refuse gifts that create obligation, but that fails because they need steel and speed. So Kiarga takes the sword and leaves before gratitude turns into questions. So now the group's jeer is stronger, until the air outside changes with marching boots. A column enters Branica with banners and polished armor. Normally that means a royal parade, but Kiarga climbs for a rooftop check, and it works because height shows intent. So now he sees it isn't celebration, it's occupation. Until Princess Norn rides through the gate, smiling like she owns the city. Beside her walks Blade, a sword hero who doesn't bother hiding her arrogance. The worst part is she looks around like she's shopping for victims. So now Branica's neutrality dies in daylight, until Blade turns her head as if she feels him watching. The moment Blade enters Branica, the night stops being safe. Kiarga doesn't chase her, he studies her. Normally, you strike your enemy the second you see them, but that fails because Norn's soldiers would turn the street into a gallows. So he stays invisible and lets Blade reveal her habits. And it works because predators repeat patterns. So now he learns where she drinks, where she walks, and where she thinks no one can touch her. Until the rumors start changing tone, girls begin vanishing after sunset. Doors stay shut, lanterns go dark early. The worst part is people whisper Blade's name like it's weather. Normally, townsfolk report a crime and expect protection. But that fails because the soldiers here protect the princess, not the weak. So Kiarga treats this like a timer. Because every hour he waits, someone pays. So now he decides to force Blade into a private mistake, until Freya asks the question nobody wants to answer. How do you bait a sword hero without sacrificing someone? Setsuna's ears flatten with rage. Eva's eyes narrow, ready to disappear. Normally you use an ally as bait and hope you arrive in time. But that fails, because on time still means blood. So Kiarga chooses the only bait he trusts: himself. Suddenly he touches his face and heals his bones into a new shape. His shoulders narrow, his voice softens. His hair shifts. The worst part is how natural it looks. Don't blink, he becomes a woman. He names the disguise Kira, a single lovely flower meant to draw a knife. So now the trap is bait that can fight back. Until he has to walk into the city alone. He enters a crowded pub under warm lantern light. Music covers footsteps. Laughter covers lies. Normally that means you blend in and relax. But he does the opposite because predators love noise. So he sits where exits are clear and sightlines stay wide. And it works because control starts with position. So now he waits with a soft smile and careful eyes. Until Blade walks in like she owns the air. Blade spots Kira fast. She moves in with practice charm. She offers a drink. She talks like a friend. Normally you refuse and leave. But that fails because refusal makes you interesting. So Kiarga accepts and watches her fingers. And it works because fingers confess the trick first. So now he sees the tiny drop vanish into the cup. Until Blade leans closer, the poison hits like warm sleep. Kiarga lets his body go heavy on purpose. Normally you fight the drug and stand up fast, but that fails because standing up makes a scene, so he pretends to lose and lets Blade win. The consequence is immediate. Her confidence blooms. So now she lifts Kira like stolen property. Until cold air bites outside, Blade drags Kira through narrow streets toward an inn. Normally you wake up and attack in the alley, but that fails because alley violence draws guards and witnesses, so Kiarga stays limp and listens instead. And it works because sound maps the route. So now he counts turns, steps, and doors, until a desperate man rushes them from the dark. A father lunges forward with shaking hands, eyes full of grief. The worst part is courage like that gets people killed. Normally you let him strike the villain and call it justice, but that fails, because Blade would cut him down instantly. So Kiarga snaps awake just enough to move. He drops the man with nerve strikes, not to protect Blade but to save the man's life. So now Blade sees a flicker of skill from prey. Until suspicion sharpens her smile. At first it looks like Blade is just playing. Normally, that means you can wait. But he does the opposite and tightens the trap. And it works because impatience makes predators sloppy. So now she pulls Kira into a room and locks the door. Until she starts preparing control, not romance at first. It looks like Daard. Normally that means Ada. But Hita, and it works because Da. So now until Dada shows up. The worst part is this. Don't blink, then it gets worse. Blade binds Kira with practiced speed. She keeps Ragnarok close like a holy relic. Normally that means the plan failed. But that fails as a conclusion, because Kiarga wanted isolation. So he keeps acting frightened, letting her believe she's fully in control. And it works because predators relax when they feel safe. So now she leans in, confident and cruel, until Kiarga catches sight of the sword's aura. Ragnarok hums, and the air tightens. Blade's strength spikes when she grips it. Normally you trade blows until she tires, but that fails because Ragnarok feeds her stamina and recovery. So Kiarga waits for one specific mistake, her attention drifting from the blade. So now he holds still, letting her posture shift forward. Until she tries to claim. The helpless flower hears the moment. If you're still watching, tell me in the comments. Should Kiarga end Blade fast or make her suffer for what she's done? And if you want the next payoff, like the video and subscribe. Suddenly, Blade notices something that makes her freeze. Her eyes widen, her breath stutters. The worst part is she understands the bait is a trap. Normally a villain screams for help, but that fails because pride keeps her quiet for one heartbeat. So Kiarga uses that heartbeat. He snaps restraints and shifts his body toward attack range. So now the rules change inside the room. It's no longer prey and predator. It's execution and escape, until Blade jerks for Ragnarok and the drug still drags on Kiarga's limbs. His muscles feel heavy. His vision swims. Normally, that means you lose the opening, but he does the opposite and commits anyway. And it works because hesitation is death. So now he lunges as Blade's hand closes on the sword, until Blade's lips curl into a grin. Blade's grin lasts 1 second, then Kiarga steals it. He moves first, because second place dies. Normally a sword hero wins by drawing faster, but that fails because Kiarga isn't racing the blade, he's racing the grip. So he strikes her wrist and knocks Ragnarok offline. And it works because power can activate without contact. So now Blade's swing is late, until she brute forces strength anyway. She grabs the sword again and the air tightens with pressure. The worst part is her body surges like a storm. Normally you back away and reset distance, but that fails because distance is where her swings become lethal. So Kiarga steps inside the arc and turns the room into a cage. So now her wide swings hit wood and stone, not flesh. Until Kiarga's fingers find the dagger he saved for this moment. The dagger flashes dull green. Poison, proof not threats. Normally a villain expects a fair duel, but that fails because Kiarga doesn't offer fairness. He offers consequences, so he drives the blade into her side, quick and deep, and it works because poison attacks the future, not just the present. So now Blade's breath catches and her rhythm breaks. Until she tries to heal through Ragnarok like she always has. She reaches for the sword like a lifeline. Normally that means she snaps back with a grin, but her fingers tremble. So Kiarga hits the reaching arm, targeting joints. The consequence is immediate numbness, then weakness. So now Ragnarok is inches away but unreachable. Until Blade's pride turns into panic. The worst part is panic makes her loud. Don't blink. Kiarga clamps a hand over her mouth and drags her down. Then it gets worse. He keeps it silent while the poison keeps working. Blade's legs stop obeying. She collapses. Normally this is where she recovers, but that fails because her arm won't close. So now the sword hero is on the floor helpless. Until Kiarga makes the humiliation undeniable. He kicks Ragnarok away and steps on it like it's trash. Normally, taking a weapon is just a win, but for her it's stripping the mask. The proof is simple. She can't stand, she can't heal. She can't even crawl. So now her hunt ends in her own room. Until footsteps pass in the hallway, Kiarga freezes for half a heartbeat. The city is full of soldiers tonight. Normally you flee out the window immediately, but that fails because rooftops can be watched too. So he listens, counts the rhythm, and waits for the patrol to move on. And it works because danger has a pattern. So now he slips out like a late guest leaving a party. Until the street outside feels different, he stops at Carmen's little shop for one risky breath. Normally you avoid locals after a fight, but that fails because locals are how you measure heat. Carmen whispers that soldiers have been asking about strange potions and a traveler with too much money. So Kiarga buys one cheap item and leaves a different scent trail out the back, and it works because hunters follow what looks easiest. So now the first wave chases the wrong corner, until the real hunters start thinking lanterns flicker. People whisper, Norn's men are everywhere, and they're not just guarding, they're searching. At first, it looks like a normal patrol. Normally, that means you can blend in. But he does the opposite and tests their attention, and it works because real hunters track reactions. So now he sees which soldiers scan faces, not streets. Until he senses one gaze that doesn't belong to ordinary guards. Hake, the knight who watches like a scholar. The worst part is he doesn't rush, he reads. Normally you sprint and hope speed saves you, but that fails, because speed creates a trail. So Kiarga moves with crowds, cuts corners, and changes direction without stopping. So now ordinary eyes lose him, until Haki's eyes adjust and follow the pattern anyway. Kiarga reaches his allies without calling attention. Freya's there, face tight with fear. Setsuna crouches above, ready to strike. Eve waits in shadow, quieter than before. Normally demons run when humans bring armies, but she doesn't run because she just saw a hero fall. So now Eve commits to the alliance. Until Kiarga admits the next problem. Blade is handled, but Norn is not. A princess with soldiers can erase lives without drawing a sword. So Kiarga chooses movement before sunrise. Normally that means you sleep and recover. But that fails because dawn is when hunters arrive. So he orders them to pack fast and leave by edge roads, not main gates. And it works because edges have fewer eyes, so now they slip toward the outskirts while the city still pretends to sleep. Until a distant horn changes the night's meaning. At first it looks like Daad. Normally that means Daden, but he does Daad. And it works because now. So now S until Dada shows up. The worst part is, don't blink, us. Then it gets worse. SS. The horn isn't celebration, it's a signal. Torches shift direction like they got new orders. Normally that would mean the search is widening, but Kiarga realizes the search is focusing on him, so he tightens spacing and keeps faces down. The proof is simple. A patrol cuts across their route, forcing a detour that costs time. So now they must move faster without looking like they're running. Until Haki appears at the far end of the street, watching without blinking. Kiarga doesn't fight him here. Normally that feels like weakness, but that fails as a strategy because ego gets you killed. So he slips into a narrow passage and disappears into a seam in the city, and it works because seams aren't on maps. So now the group escapes the tightest net, until Kiarga hears a whisper that turns his blood cold. Norn isn't just hunting, she's the type to punish crowds to make a point. The worst part is innocence will suffer for his shadow. So Kiarga grips Ragnarok tighter and keeps moving, already planning the next strike, until the princess decides to squeeze harder. But that wasn't the worst part.